If you carry a firearm and discharge your weapon in self-defense, you could face hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expenses. So carry the protection of CCW Safe, Self-Defense Legal Services membership. Upfront payment of all criminal and civil defense costs with no out-of-pocket for members.
We are back. I'm Chris Evan, the CEO of Survival Dispatch, joined tonight by my good friend Randy Nance, back home in Texas, combat wounded Green Beret, and below him, our in-house author extraordinaire, 26-year CIA case officer, Jeff, MD. I got a quick announcement that I need to make before I forget. I was in a meeting this morning with Carnival and Wasatch Wagyu, and y'all remember I told you last week that Carnival is facing a 15% increase in the price of their wholesale beef, and it's already in effect for them. But of course, they have stock, and they've committed to hold the line till January 15th unless they completely run out of stock. What I didn't know until this morning, there are some jurisdictions that if you sign up for a subscription service for a hard product, a tangible product, technically in some jurisdictions, you can't change that pricing. So the deal is that if you sign up for a subscription with Carnival for beef before January 15th, it'll hold the line for the entire year 2026. And they also give me this piece of information. This is not like industry wide. I don't know how it compares. Their wholesale price from the first week of January 2025 to the first week of January this year, 49% increase in their wholesale prices. So if you want to lock in on beef and it's only going to get more expensive, now's the time to do it. So tonight, our long war series, we're going to be discussing red states versus blue states economies after CCTA's complex coordinated terrorist attacks. But before we do that, let's knock out the conflicted question. Let me get the boys up on this stage as well. Conflictedthegame.com. These are 14 card games based in post-apocalyptic scenarios. Most of the questions have some element of morality, hence the name Conflicted. After the collapse of modern society, the federal government used several different types of aircraft support to ensure they stayed in power. Some of them were attack helicopters and surveillance drones. If your government decided you were a target, now wait a minute, didn't we do this one already?
Yeah.
That's what I thought. Stand by. The conflicted question that comes up at the end of the tonight will not be this one. I'm going to pick another one while somebody else is speaking at some point here. Apologies for that. All right. Before we get into let me get you guys up on the other stage here. Okay, there we go. So before we get into the sit rep and before we get into tonight's main topic, I want to revisit the 7 categories of information I covered in my special report last night on Venezuela, because Randy is a Green Beret, Jeff is former CIA. These guys have a lot of knowledge on these sort of things. So the first bucket that I hit on was, actually, let me give you this little piece. The way I organized my special report last night, if you didn't see it, was to list 7 categories where Maduro has done significant damage to the United States of America. The first bucket of damage was he essentially established a forward operating base in the Western Hemisphere for our adversaries, Iran, China, Russia, North Korea, Cuba, some other smaller companies like Belarus, and especially Hezbollah, which is an extension of the IRGC. And if we follow Khalid's intelligence, it's essentially the IRGC that runs Iran, not the Ayatollahs, but forward operating base. Jeff, I'm going to come to you first just because I've got you stacked up number 1 on this side. Talk to me about the forward base that they put together and how, in my opinion, this was like a bay of pigs that just never ended, right?
Well, what the Russians, Hezbollah has been in there for decades. And then once Chavez came in, the Russians came in and they put in, they used it as a base of their operations for intelligence purposes. They also put in listening posts, things like that, so they could pick up transmissions from, our Air Force and our Navy, anybody out at sea, things like that. China has done the same, but probably not quite as much. China looks at them as a cash cow to be milked. And Venezuela currently owes China somewhere around $60 billion for infrastructure projects the Chinese are theoretically completing. Of course, the Chinese workmanship is crap, so most of them will never actually work.
Jeff, was that part of the Belt and Road Initiative? And if so, can you explain how Belt and Road is used to essentially bankrupt companies and make them, or countries, pardon me, make them beholden to China?
Yeah, what the Chinese do is they say, look, we'll build infrastructure for you. We'll finance it. We'll build it. We'll figure out, whatever you need, and then you pay us over time. Well, the payback rates are set in stone, and the workmanship is generally very shoddy, and the financing terms are ridiculous. They put in a railroad, I want to say it was Tanzania maybe, linked the interior of the country to the coast. China said, look, you'll make all this money by getting, agricultural products to market, blah, blah, blah. Of course, it never panned out. It never made the money they said it would. And of course, Tanzania couldn't pay for it. So China basically said, okay, we'll take it. We'll take it over, and they own it and they run it. And then they hold everybody hostage because it's the only way to get goods from the coast to the interior and from the interior to the coast, short of trucking them in over really, really bad roads. In South America, they built a dam. I want to say it was Bolivia maybe, or Paraguay. They built a dam, and it was all them, their engineering, everything else. Well, they put it in an area that was not ideal. And they also did not put in a viable silt system to keep silt out of the reservoir. They've built the dam, and it is expected to be completely silted in like 5-10 years after it's completed. And for perspective, Hoover Dam was built in the 30s, 100 years ago, and it's not silted in. But this one's going to be silted in like 10 years.
Amazing.
Yeah, but they still have to pay for the dam. And then, so what China will do is they'll say, okay, we get to sell all the power the dam generates. So that'll be our payback. So they'll basically control the power grid in that country.
Yeah, no kidding. Just before we come to you, Randy, quickly, somebody said, wanted to pick carefully since I do love beef, but don't want to be stuck with all beef either. You can get multiple different types of subscriptions from Carnival. So you can get beef, chicken, and pork mixed together. You can get beef by itself. You're not just locked into one. Randy, from a Green Beret's perspective, what's the significance of having this forward operating base essentially in Venezuela versus not having it? You're on mute, Randy.
Yep. So I think that, anything just no different than South Korea. Why are we still in South Korea when the Korea War was, back during the Vietnam days or roughly before? I mean, in the 50s, I think, right? So it's because it's just so much easier. It gives us a lot of latitude, and it's, going in to invade or coming in to take an airfield, you get some stuff destroyed. Well, if you get to stay there forever afterwards, I mean, you already have a base to jump to. It's the same thing we all said basically when they gave up Afghanistan and certainly Bagram in the end. You know what I mean? Because all of us know we're going to be back there sooner or later anyway. Why would you give that up at this point? And in South America, or in Venezuela, you think about the moves that are being made there, as Jeff just described some of it. I've heard also that the Chinese were there making some sort of deal with them. And in fact, apparently the consulate, not on property, obviously, but the Chinese consulate was still in the country, hadn't even left yet. So the deal wasn't all the way done. So that was also a message to Xi Jinping and everybody else. Hey, if you're so bad, I mean, I love the video that Trump put out, right? Where the old boys, come and get me. Don't take too long, you coward. Okay, duly noted. And we will accept that challenge, buddy.
Careful.
I would have given, everybody knows how important the family jewels are to men, but I'm here to tell you one thing, Chris. I would have almost given up one of them just to be able to be on that mission.
Oh my God, there's a mental image none of us need, but thanks. All right. The second bucket that I covered last night, as far as damage that's been done to us by Maduro, is flooding our country with cocaine and other drugs, killing Americans, and, causing devastating crime in portions of our country. Jeff, love to hear your thoughts on that.
What, on the drugs coming into the country?
Yeah.
Yeah, primarily out of Venezuela, it's going to be mostly cocaine. And people go, oh, it's not fentanyl, it's cocaine. Well, mostly cocaine. I'm sure there is some fentanyl, but the whole thing is like, who cares? It's illegal drugs. It's not supposed to be here either way. The fentanyl, most of it's coming in from Mexico because they're shipping precursors to Mexico from China, and then the Mexican cartels actually manufacture it in Mexico. And for them, that makes a lot of sense because when they control Mexico, the Mexican government's pretty much useless. And it reduces their logistic supply chain because they don't have to ship it, through Central America like you have to do with cocaine. They could just, make it in frickin' Monterey and then, try and get it across the border. So it makes sense. It just shortens their supply lines.
So one of the things that's in the indictment, which I covered last night, was he's been charged with being the head of Cartel de Sols, like Cartel of the Sun, right?
Right.
And very short order, what's her name? Sheinbaum, the president of Mexico, who's obviously controlled by the cartels, said to the entire world, if you don't stand up against Donald Trump, we're all going to be in this same boat. Well, no, but when you work for a cartel, pardon me, absolutely. How do you think she feels knowing all the stuff you just covered on drugs and knowing what we just did in Venezuela? She's got to be either second or third on the block, I would say.
Yeah, I have a feeling she's sweating bullets right now. And it's not so much that we would go after her. She's not the head of a cartel. She's just, her and her government, they've just been paid off, and they have been for years, to look the other way. This is like the corrupt fire inspector who will, ignore the bad wiring if you slip him $250. But what it does, it opens the door to the possibility of U.S. military attacks on cartels inside Mexico. And the problem for her is it makes her look bad to her own people, because they're going to say, what do you mean, the Yankees just come down here and do whatever the hell they want? Well, they're not stopping the drug smugglers, so we will. And can they stop us? No, not really. So it really undermines her authority and the authority of her party.
Yeah, it sure does. Randy, your thoughts on Maduro playing a role in flooding our country with illegal drugs and what that's done also to the crime rate in many jurisdictions?
Well, it's no secret. We've been watching stats from drug use and drug abuse and all that since I've been alive, right? And I'm 57, so it's been around my entire life. And there's a direct correlation with drug abuse and drug use. When that goes up, so does crime. It's just a fact. Because the reality is all these addicts don't have the money to pay for their habit. And guess what? There's a fair number of them, a fairly large portion of them, that are more than willing to go out and commit crimes just to get some money to feed their habit. And I'm going to suggest it goes well beyond just the drugs that he's flooded in, right? I mean, Venezuela, Chavez is the guy that developed the smart man tech and the Dominion voting systems to cheat. I heard that apparently they have fixed over 700 elections around the world with this stuff. So I have no doubt between money laundering, this Dominion voting system, and drugs, this guy's at the hub of a whole lot of it, where all this is about to come out. And that's when I will say you should buckle your seatbelt, because when they start trying to hold people accountable above where this Maduro guy is, those people aren't going to just let us come throw the cuffs on them. They're more than willing probably to start World War III and who knows what all to keep themselves from getting in trouble. And I would further say the Mexican lady or any of the others, the people that are worried right now are criminals. I don't care what their position or what level of government in or who they are. If they're worried and complain that what Trump just did, It's because they're criminals and they know they could be next.
100%. So it's interesting that you would bring up elections, because that's where I'm going next, Jeff, is, you know, the Venezuelans have played a role in stealing many elections. And like Randy said, it could be 700. It's a lot. It's a lot of elections. And it's the software that runs on the Dominion machines, which is called Smartmatic. And we know this unequivocally because our good friend Jeff O'Donnell, Fingerprints of Fraud, the movie.com, he's the one who did the forensics on the server image provided by Tina Peters, which of course was provided by the Pillow Guys IT team. And no ifs, ands, or buts. There were all of these foreign players involved. And you've got the Democrats in 2016 saying, oh, the Russians, they got Donald Trump in power. No, they didn't. They didn't want Donald Trump in power. They wanted Hillary. They wanted Biden. They wanted Kamala, because they're all weak compared to Trump. And if anything, they rigged the election against Trump, not for him. But Jeff, speak to, from a global perspective, former CIA case officer, this software being used to essentially alter elections around the world.
Yeah, it's, Stalin said a long, long time ago, it doesn't matter who votes, it matters who counts the votes. And that's exactly what this. People have been meddling in elections ever since there have been elections. Intel agencies have been doing this since there were Intel agencies. We did it in Italy in 1948 because the Russians were doing it in Italy in 1948. They were propping up the communists, and we went the other way. We propped up the conservatives, for lack of a better word. And it turns out that our election meddling was better than their election meddling, and the conservatives won. So this is nothing new. But when you use computers, it allows you to steal more votes faster and more efficiently than ever before. You don't have to come up with a million ballots. You don't have to go out and burn ballot boxes, which was the old school way of doing it. You can do it now by just pushing a button on a keyboard and making 100,000 votes go away, or more likely switch 100,000 votes from candidate A to candidate B. That way, the number of votes cast is the same. Now, what we saw in 2020, you have this mystery 8 million people who have hence disappeared. When Biden got more votes than anyone ever in history in the United States, and then those votes disappeared on the next go round. That is when that's just the fraud. That's when you have fake ballots and people filling up multiple ballots and people who shouldn't voting. But the smarter way is just to change the votes that were cast. That way, if someone says 100,000 people voted, yeah, they voted, but they voted for candidate B and we gave it to candidate A.
Yeah, huge force multiplier. If you just run an average, if you take Obama's first election, second election, Hillary 2016, Biden 2020, Kamala Harris 2024, they all got 65 million plus or minus a couple million in each one of those elections. The Republican candidate got something relatively similar to give this illusion of 50-50, two different sides of the same coin. It averages out to about 15 million votes being fabricated in 2020 because Trump's votes went way up as well. And then, of course, they completely disappeared in 2024. A big part of that was the multiplier that was placed on it's bad enough to have the fake votes, and it's bad enough to flip a vote from candidate A to candidate B, but it's even worse when it gets multiplied by 50, 100, however many times before it goes off to Edison where everything is collected. Randy, do you want to add anything more as far as stealing elections is concerned by Maduro and his regime?
I was just going to say that I saw a little demonstration today of that that software, right? And basically, for the people that if you're one of the administrators that has a password, when you go in and you change all these things, there's no log of it. It's not like a regular computer that logs everything that every user ever does, and it's all in there somewhere in your computer on the hard drive. No, it's untraceable. They can go in and change. And basically, I can't remember what state they showed in 2020, but basically what they did was, when the voting was done, Donald Trump had it by quite a margin. And I don't remember the specific numbers, but really all they did was just switch the names. So
Right.
they gave Biden those votes and then gave Trump Biden's votes, so he still lost. But they also showed times to change votes. All they had to do in there was go in and change one little number on each candidate, and it would flip all kind of votes instantly. And so it's pretty scary. You know, and then you think about when Chavez was in office and when he developed this stuff. I will submit that's how Obama probably got elected both times. It certainly was when he got reelected. However, there's really no telling. Oh, I guarantee it, because they only have to switch a tiny little bit on each state. I would make
how many times you heard me say, Randy, we haven't had legit elections since Woodrow Wilson, 1912.
Well, there's really no telling. You're probably right. There probably's never been one. It's probably never been one.
Well, probably never been a legit one, but a couple legit outcomes, right? JFK 1960, Trump 2016, Trump 2024. Yeah. If you read Pete Hegseth's book, he actually says that the election cheating as far as the president's concerned started immediately after the Civil War in the 1860s.
You know, I don't doubt that. You know, and I watched the movie about Garfield, right? And it showed, and they all did the vote in the House at that time, right? And they were there until it ended, which was pretty crazy because Garfield wasn't even on the ticket. So this went on for hours until all the votes switched to him. But they all did it by hand and they turned in their vote. You know what I mean? But it was all in one building. Now, again, this is 1700s or the 1800s whenever Garfield was in office. So quite a bit different system than we have today, for sure. And I don't think women could vote at all back then. So,
yeah. So the next bucket is bribing American politicians. And it's interesting because I showed a list last night. I'm fixing to show it again before I come to you, Jeff. But I just saw somebody in the comment section say, hey, show that list again that you showed last night. So check this out. This is, let me zoom in on this a little bit because it's a bit of an eye test here. Venezuela's former chief of national intelligence, Hugo Carvajal, has officially released every U.S. senator who is on the Venezuela list of politicians who've been receiving millions of dollars in kickbacks from the Maduro regime and Venezuelan drug trafficking organizations that make up his government in exchange for using their government positions and influence to undermine President Trump and Secretary of War Pete Hegseth's ongoing war with these narco-terrorists. Every one of these senators is guilty of providing aid and comfort to the enemy during a time of war and has blood on their hands. I read the whole list last night. I won't do it tonight just because it took a minute. But every rhino out there, for example, who's been in opposition to Trump, like Lisa Murkowski, if you can see, top of the list. All the usual bad actors, Adam Schiff, Chris Murphy, they're all on there. But, you got John Cornyn, who's just a piece of crap rhino. That's not the whole slew, by the way. Here's the balance of the people that are on that. Bernie Sanders. It's a long list. I think it totals 60 senators from both sides of the aisle paid off, and it's exactly who you would expect it to be. So, Jeff,
the sad thing is most of those people would have done it for free. They didn't even have to pay them.
Yeah, no kidding. But speak to just how invasive this has been as far as throwing a major screw into our country by paying people to oppose anything that's pro-America and support everything that's anti-America.
Yeah, I mean, for some of them, it's just the money. They need campaign donations or they just want the money in their back pocket. For a lot of them, like, the Bernie Sanders of the world, it's ideological as well. They're doing it because they hate this country. They hate the capitalist system. They hate what we have accomplished, what we've achieved. And they don't think we deserve it, and they'll do anything to bring the country as a whole down a peg or two. They're just basically traitors.
It is. So I got to be careful what I say here because I've been thrown off X 3 times for this topic. Is there the potential that it could actually be charged as treason, convicted as treason, and face the stiffest, for treason? I can't say it because that's
I know what you're saying. Treason, to be proven under the Constitution, is they're very strict. You've got to have eyewitnesses and things like that. So to face the ultimate penalty, so to speak, it's difficult to do. I don't know that when the last time we actually did that with anybody. I know they wanted to do it to Benedict Arnold, but he got away and then went to go work for the Brits. So it's a very high bar, and it was set in a time where there were no computers and there wasn't anything like that. So they were relying on eyewitnesses. And very few people commit treason in front of eyewitnesses.
Jeff, I'm having I get some timers kicking in here. Who was the Russian couple, or maybe the American couple who cooperated with the Soviets and put to death? What was that under considered sedition, treason, or did they charge them with something else?
No, they were charged with treason.
Okay.
But the thing is, we had intercepts of Russian intel communications that named them by name.
Okay.
There was the Venona papers. There was in World War II, when Russia was about to be overrun by the Germans, they actually had to reuse one-time pads, which is an encryption system. And if you do it right, it's unbreakable. But they reused the pads. And once you do that, you open the door. And it took us years, like over a decade, we worked decrypting messages that were used on those with that one-time pad over again. And we were able to do it. And it listed the Rosenbergs by name. In fact, they were worried about Julius having a nervous breakdown because he was working too hard for the Russians.
Wow. Yeah. Amazing. So, Randy, before I get your take, I want to give a quick shout out to Reed. Thank you. I just got your email, and I forgot to mention that whether it's Carnival or Wasatch Wagyu, if you buy over $99 and you're an annual subscriber to the Guardians, forward that receipt to support@survivaldispatch.com. I'll tack on a 30-day extension every time that you do that. We have a bunch of people who subscribe now to Carnival. They'll never pay a penny to be a Survival Dispatch Guardian ever again. Randy, your thoughts on the Maduro regime bribing our political and government officials?
Well, as we look at that list, now we can kind of grasp the understanding, and then also understand why the Epstein, it may there not be a list, so to speak, like what we expect, but they, believe me, folks, they had all the video, they had all the disc and all the hard drives from him. They know who the guilty people are on that Epstein list. And when you look at the amount of people that just Venezuela alone, as probably not even all of them have been paying off, it's no wonder they gave the banks, a pass here a few years back saying, oh, they're too big to fail. Right. Because they were getting paid by them too. But when you look at that, that's why we see no one gets in there and does anything about it, because they say it's too big. Not to rig, it's too big now. If they turn over, it's everybody. Well, you know what, though? Unfortunately, that's exactly what needs to happen. I've been saying it for a while now, like not 10 years, but at least 7. What we really needed, and our forefathers were extremely smart. And it's obvious that they had went through stuff that we're just now starting to go through, right? Because they not only used the Bible, but they came up with a perfect system. But they couldn't see 250 years down the road, because unfortunately, revolution should not be the only mechanism we have to fight back with them. We should have a big red fucking button, boom, like the easy button, where we can go up on the hill. Hell, and if we all had to show up there at once, all 300 million of us, we could pile into DC. I guarantee we could fit. And force them. We could go through all their records. And I mean, everybody on the Hill, all 525 or whatever the total number, including the Supreme Court justices. We go through all their financial records, all their emails and their communications. And if somehow some of them come out clean and they haven't committed treason or crimes or haven't filled their own pockets with our taxpayer dollars, good. You get to keep your job, move on out. See you later. See you tomorrow. Be at work. But if they didn't, we take them out on the front lawn and we stretch their neck out. And I mean, every single one of them. And if we did that at this time, in this juncture, you wouldn't see any kind of corruption for quite some time after this. But the problem is we don't have that mechanism, and there's no way for us to easily just do that. And it's no different than they're not going to vote down their own raises or term limits. They're not going to allow us to vote on the stuff that really matters.
All right. So first audience poll of the night. If somebody was to bring something to market, a big red button, and maybe it made like a siren sound that you could put on your desk and it said Real American TM Randy Nance, would you buy that product? Because my wife bought me a bicycle horn 6 or 7 years ago. And if you're asking why she bought me a bicycle horn, is because I would be reading my morning news and I'd be hollering at her saying, you won't believe what these assholes are doing now. So I said, it's a clown show. So she went and she bought me a bicycle horn. She said, look, I can't hear you across the house, but just honk the horn and I'll know that you're reading something from the clown show. Come on in. So I've actually tried to use, Randy probably remembers this, I tried to use the horn on the podcast, but the frequency wouldn't be picked up by my mic. So I had to stop using it. It was a great crutch. I'm telling you, it was fantastic. Still, I went and bought a second one just so I have a backup because I lost track of the first one. I did find it eventually. So I actually have 2 clown horns. The next,
that's right, Bruno. I apologize. I messed up the verbiage. We don't go stretch their neck out. We BFE them.
There you go. Attaboy. Good correction. Good correction. Oh, so maybe that's it. Maybe the red button just says BFE, Real American TM Randy Nance.
There you go.
Mash. Yeah, we're all getting suspended. We get, you know how they smoked our video last Thursday night that Jeff and I did with Pastor Sam Jones, right? Like 3 minutes left in the video. They took it down. They gave me a strike and said that it was because of firearms. We violated their firearms policy on our small channel that only has 4,500 subs. It was well over 9,000 views. They smoked it. I appealed. I now know exactly what was going on there. I appealed. They reinstated it, but we couldn't stream because if you get a strike, you can't stream. So I said, but you guys didn't restore my ability to stream. Well, that's just what happens when you get a strike. And I was like, you reversed the strike. Yep, we can't do anything about it. Yesterday's special report and tonight I just had a quick look at the stats. I'm pretty sure they've tagged our small channel just like they tagged our big channel, you know, to suppress us. But anyway, with that being said, Jeff, next bucket of damage done to our country by the Maduro regime is a big one. And that's weaponized migration against us under the Biden installation, by aiding NGOs, emptying their prisons, sending the TDA gang here en masse, and also sending Hezbollah jihadi terrorists as well. Give me your thoughts on the weaponized migration that the Maduro regime used against us.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know if he was smart enough to figure that out and do it as a planned thing from the beginning. I think it just turned out to be a fortunate side effect for him. He was trying to, he did a Castro. He emptied his prisons. Castro did it during the Mariel boat lift. He's doing the same thing. And if you have hardened criminals, you don't want to have to feed, you don't want to pay prison guards, you kick them out, let them out of jail, and you say, on one condition, you get the hell out of here and you go north. They've had a huge, like 8 million people have left the country, and they were fleeing, Maduro's regime and the repression. Did he repress them with the idea that they would leave the country and then, come and hurt ours? Probably not. It was just for him a happy, happenstance. Because with that 8 million that left, a lot of them were people he didn't want to leave. All the engineers at PDVSA, which was their state-run petroleum company, when he nationalized it, and then they went on, and then years later they went on strike, and he fired them all.
Mm-hmm.
So they said, hell with it, and they left, and they came to the United States. Houston's full of them. They're very good engineers. They're very good petroleum engineers, and they had to leave because they lost their jobs. And their oil production plummeted as a result. They tried to replace them with Cubans, but Cubans don't know jack shit about the oil industry. So that's why they went from like 2 million barrels a day to like 400,000 barrels a day.
I interviewed a Venezuelan engineer on behalf of one of my clients when we had our consultancy post Oracle. And when the guy was done the first in-person one, we always did a phone interview first, then in person. I said to this guy, I said, yeah, you're way too smart to work for us. It would be a disservice to you. And jokingly said, you should just go down the road to, Kennedy Space Center and sign up with NASA. He ended up getting hired by Blue Origin, by the way. So, anyway, Randy, your thoughts on the weaponized migration that was basically rammed down our throats?
Well, like Jeff pointed out, it was a win-win for that guy. I mean, and it's not hard to think of, if you're going to, all of a sudden you get the word that you just send anybody and you're a little pissant leader over a third world country, you're already probably a little bit jealous of the success the United States has and the kind of global power that we have. So I have no doubt that, hey, yeah. And then, these people look at history too, what's worked before and what's worked in the past. And, they may come up with something new and different all the time, but the reality is they do go back and look at that. Heck, back when Castro did that, he let all the bad guys. I'm like, that's a good idea. Let me just let them all out and give them a ticket to go however they came into the United States. And so it's just another one of those things for him. It was a win-win. He doesn't have to plan it. I mean, he didn't have to plan that. All he had to do was execute it once so whoever gave them, okay, now's the time to go. They flipped the trigger, basically initiating this program, and he just capitalized on it.
Yeah, for sure. Don't remember if it was on this podcast or another podcast, but one of my earliest memories would be 1974, going to Uncle Fred's in Fort Lauderdale at the time and seeing the Cuban refugees all penned up underneath I-95 down there. Do you remember when Obama had like 100,000 miners in DFW, Randy, and they put them underneath the George Bush Turnpike, and that they were all miners, like there was no adults? It gave me wicked deja vu going from Arlington up to McKinney.
Yeah, I bet. And I was thinking about also when it was here not too long. I don't think it was during the Biden years, was it? Might have been, but there was a bunch underneath some freeways again on the Texas. But I do believe, I think that was in the beginning of the Biden's years, wasn't it? Because then once the news got there wasn't as many people. So it was one of those that wasn't covered. But yeah, it's an interesting thing that we've done before. What else you're going to do with them? Certainly then I remember too. Now I didn't live in Florida, as you know, at that time, but everybody remembers seeing boat. I saw boats and I'm like, man, these people are crazy. If they I know it's only 90 miles, man, but that thing doesn't look too seaworthy to me.
Yeah, like homemade rafts, basically, yeah. Right? So, Jeff, the next bucket of damage that Maduro did to us that was part of my special report last night is he basically funneled money from our adversaries through NGOs to, fuel these grassroots, peaceful protests, pro-Hamas, pro-Antifa, BLM, as well as very vocally, not so much Maduro, but the money and the people behind it promoting that people like Donald Trump and Charlie Kirk should be assassinated. I know this wasn't his mastermind. I think he was a useful idiot in this, but he still participated in it.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those, the enemy of my enemy is my friend situation. He didn't like us. We didn't like him. So anybody who was going to cause us grief was all of a sudden one of his best friends, and he was willing to help them out however he could. Whether it be funding, laundering their money, allowing people free passage through his country, giving them passports. That's part of his indictment is he gave Venezuelan passports to people or sold them to people en masse. So yeah, he was like a one-stop shop for the anti-American crowd.
Yeah, absolutely. Randy, love to hear your thoughts on, I know he's not the ringleader, like I said to Jeff, but he definitely played a role in funding these NGOs and all the people inside our country who hate their own country.
Yeah, I was kind of alluding to that earlier. This guy was like a hub. So the amount of really what people don't understand, because of course it started with the drug boat strikes, right? And then they weren't happy about that. And now we went and snatched this guy up. The reason the Democrats and all the rest of the world leaders that are criminals and pedophiles, or shitting their pants right now is not because he just disobeyed the law or international law. It's because he just gave them all a wake-up call that shit's about to really go down and we're going to hold you accountable. And the problem, they all know that a lot of it goes right through Venezuela. Again, if we look at the drugs, we look at the voting machines, we look at these NGOs and all this money laundering, you can imagine what the information this guy holds, and was why I said I hope he doesn't suicide himself before they can actually get him to court and charge him with all this stuff, because they're going to present all that evidence, including the 2020 election stuff. And so this is going to be unroll a whole ball of wax. That's why he went and picked the guy up. While everybody else around the world is playing checkers, this man is playing chess.
Yeah, I'd say Maduro's a strong candidate for hanging himself with paper bed sheets. It's got a distinct possibility. So the seventh and final bucket of damage that I covered last night, as far as the Maduro regime damaging America, is collaborating with our adversaries to promote communism in America. And we're already seeing, those sentiments fueling this liberal backlash regarding Maduro's capture, despite every single thing I've seen from Venezuelans around the country and around the world celebrating this, because he just absolutely devastated their country. There was a video I played last night, Jeff, where actually there's a couple of videos of people interviewing people at these, protests, saying, well, what exactly do you think of the Venezuelans who are celebrating around the world? I haven't seen that. Where did you see it? Well, right here, it's going on in Brazil. It's going on in Venezuela. It's going on here in America. Well, I don't know that I really believe that. And the guy kept pressing this kid on it. And this kid's like, I'm here to support the democratically elected head of Venezuela, and we do not have a right, and blah, blah, blah. His brain completely short circuited. It was friggin' funny as hell.
I guess he didn't realize the guy was not elected last time. He just stayed in power, right?
Yeah, he wasn't elected the first time, but yes, absolutely. So
the elected president is Edmundo Gonzalez.
Right. So your thoughts, though, on him collaborating and backing the communists in America?
Well, yeah, and again, that's what communists do. The American communists are kind of like a fifth column. The Russians had it for years. There was Comintern, there was a Communist International Group, and they would do the bidding of the Soviets. They're the American Communist Party and the Socialist Workers' Party of America, blah, blah, blah. They were all funded by the Soviets. Now, when the Soviets ran out of money and went belly up, somebody else has to step in and fund them. And I'm sure a lot of that is coming out of Venezuela. At least it was till they destroyed their own economy. And the Chinese have done it. Chinese have been funding people as well. And it's not because, they have this big grandiose idea of taking over America in the next 5 years. They just want to be a pain in our ass. And they do a good job of it.
Yeah, for sure. Well,
these radical protests and riots won't organize themselves. It requires money and expertise.
Yeah. And did you catch, Jeff, that all of the signs across 4 major cities across America were identical? Like they had been
professionally printed
within 24 hours.
Yeah.
Like we're talking, we capture the guy and the very next day, not even 24 hours later, and they've got them. Randy, your thoughts on him propping up communist plural here in America?
I'm sorry, who was it that did that?
Maduro. This is all damage done to America by Maduro, but propping up the Communist Party and the Socialist Party, all the stuff that Jeff just touched on. You're on mute, Randy.
Sure am. Hey, so, all you really have to look at is all the support he was getting. Where do you think all that money was coming from? All the money for the drugs, all the money. I mean, he was filling his pockets probably faster than anybody else. So I'm sure he profited greatly off this. And what's he going to do? He's going to spit out the message they want you to spit out. And pro-American isn't it. Pro-American is not the message they want, and that's not the message they want around the world. All these people, because again, it comes down to whether people believe it or not, we're the last light in the world. And if they can extinguish the United States, the rest of the world's going to go right behind us. And just like what we just saw, it will be that fast. This day it happens. The next day there will be all printouts of exactly, it will have the switch will flip that quickly. And that's really what they want, so that they can have complete control. And this guy was just going lock and step, and why wouldn't he? He was in a good position if you were him.
Yeah. I've been saying for years that we are the firewall between globalism and freedom. So with that being said, we'll just pivot a little bit to the communist angle here. I don't know if you all caught this or not, but this guy here is the head of the Communist Party. So January 5th, 2026, here's the main X page of all these Communist Party chapters through the United States of America. This scumbag posted this video on December 31st, 2025. Every single person I tag in this post, blah, 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 blah. Let's go down. I just play a little bit. I'm not going to play the full 2 minutes and 10 seconds, but here is the head of ACP, the American Communist Party.
What's up, everybody? On behalf of the American Communist Party, I'd like to wish everyone, our comrades, our supporters, our sympathizers, our fraternal parties, the freedom-loving people of the world at large, and the American people, a sincere Happy New Year. I wish you all blessings, good health, and success in the new year going into 2026. I'd also like to take this opportunity to reflect a little bit on 2025 and what it meant for our Communist Party. 2025 was indeed a stormy and rocky year for our Communist Party, but it was also a year of tremendous, unprecedented success. It was the first full year of our party, and in that year, we contributed to the growth of a new workers' movement in ports and shop floors across the country. With the launch of our Central Committee, that the institution of democratic centralism has finally been complete. Our party has also witnessed the cultivation and growth of a new spirit of initiative and confidence by party cadre. Indeed, our Communist Party cadre are shaping up not simply to be followers, but the future leaders of this country.
So let me just bring up the next thing here, and then I'll get both of you to comment on it. So I was pretty sure that we still had laws on the books essentially stating that it's illegal to be a communist in America, especially the American Communist Party in particular. So as I was doing research on it, I found that the Supreme Court had struck down sections of it. Congress had repealed sections of it. So I went to 4 different AIs. I got the same answer from all of them. And I asked a simple question. Give me details of Title 50 of the U.S. Code, sections 841 to 844 that are still in effect, that have not been repealed or ruled against by the Supreme Court. So this goes on to tell you that this is, can't be a communist in America. And these are all the pieces. I'm not going to read through this. It's ginormous. I'm just trying to make a point by showing you how long it is. Those are the sections of that law that are still in effect. So, for example, under this section here, you've got 14 pieces that haven't been repealed. This one here, you've got 2 that haven't been repealed. This one here is just one whole section that hasn't been repealed. And this one here's another section, 842 and 841. So my question to you, Jeff, will come to you first on this. How come nobody's ever been charged under this?
Because you can't, probably because it's going to be deemed unconstitutional. Much as we don't like communists, people are allowed to be communists. That's just basically holding an opinion, a political opinion that's different from ours. And it's a good thing that it's not illegal, because then Democrats could get in office and make a law saying you can't be a Republican. The way to defeat communism is not to ban them. It's to give their ideas bright sunshine and people see how stupid they really are. Now, what happens, though, is you get someone cannot get a security clearance if they're a communist, because they hold allegiance to another country. But where people got in trouble, Alger Hiss being one of them, who got, he was one, Marzani was another one who went to jail. they lied about being communists on their paperwork. And so they were thrown in jail essentially for perjury. And, because if they'd come out and said, yeah, I'm a communist, they wouldn't have got the job at the State Department because that required a security clearance. But they lied and they got caught lying, and that's what they went to jail for.
Yeah. So I'm just paraphrasing here, but in that law, part that's still on the books addressing the, unconstitutional aspect of freedom of speech, those sort of things, there was very specific language that essentially said, if you are a member of the American Communist Party of America actively working to subvert our government, that, that's a felony. It's a federal charge. Yeah.
That's criminalizing action.
Correct.
Criminal activity, doing something. You cannot put someone in jail for thinking something. And being a member of the Communist Party, believing that communism is wonderful and that Marx is the greatest guy in the history of man, is not and cannot be illegal, because that's just speech. That's just freedom of speech.
Well, I disagree. Palantir.
No, you can only put people in jail for actions.
No, Palantir says otherwise. Palantir says that if you think criminal thoughts,
live with Palantir.
If you think criminal thoughts, we can not only flesh you out, we're going to put you in jail.
Yeah, we're not Minority Report.
Right. Randy, love to hear your thoughts on golly.
First of all, I thought this guy's too young to be dyeing his beard, because his beard isn't the same color as his hair. He doesn't, I don't know where he was born, but I would suspect it's not America. And the fact is, I'm a little different. Jeff's a nice guy compared to me, believe it or not. Yeah, I'd say kill them all. Fuck that shit. There is no, the only thing that we've ever defeated in communism is by killing them. It's not going to be any different for Islam. It's the same damn thing. So
Bruno's how long before Bruno corrects you again? It's coming.
Oh yeah, BFE. We should just BFE them. That's right.
Well, speaking of BFE, check this out here, and I'm sure you caught this. Hello world, meet Seth Harp, who decided it would be a good idea to dox a commander of Delta.
Oh yeah.
Seth thinks this was a brilliant idea and has removed the original post, but I'm sure he would love to hear your outrage on such events. This is the current commander of Delta Force, whose men just invaded a sovereign country, killed a bunch of innocent people, and kidnapped the rightful president. By the way, it's perfectly legal for a U.S. reporter to disclose classified material, the leakage of which I did not procure. I got to come back to you first on this, Randy, because I've heard conflicting reports that, yes, this guy's Delta Team, but he was not or is not the leader of Delta Team. I don't care either way. This is complete bullshit. This guy's not a legitimate reporter, by the way. He's just a hack. He wrote some stupid book that's all full of fantasy communist crap, but thoughts on that?
Well, so I don't know what is he talking about, the guy on the ground commander that was with the team, the squadron that went and pulled this off? Well, that very well may be. Now, I can't tell you who's in Delta Force right now either. I mean, I know some guys that are. I don't know everybody. And even if I did, I wouldn't say it over the air. Here's what I will say. This little pissant's about to learn is everybody that's ever lived through Delta Force and got out all the way up to the guys on duty now are going to be looking for you, buddy. And guess what? You just stirred a pile of ants that are going to eat you alive.
He published a picture too with the original one, which almost instantly on X was covered up. And I think that's how
he should be put in jail, because he's putting these people's lives at danger, because these guys are on the X. They're at the tip of the spear. They're the ones that are, that get all the best, the most highest profile missions. So guess who all our enemies are going to be looking for? And when you unmask them and God forbid try to give out their address, you should be skinned alive.
Yeah. So 2 people reached out to me today, both of whom I trust, to say that they saw the picture and could confirm that he's, not the guy, but regardless, he's still Delta Team, and you can't do this shit. Like there's no database where you can look people up and say, well, was this guy Delta Team or not? Because it's extremely strictly controlled, right, Randy?
So yeah, the reality is like when somebody gets through all the process, because you have to go to selection first. Once you make it through selection, that just means you got selected. You're not in yet. There's a whole 6-month operator course that washes out more than the pass. So really, the amount of people that are qualified and operational from this unit is a very small number. But reality is, you can't, whether he was the commander or not, you can't just put this guy's information out there. Otherwise, like I said, this should be a criminal offense. This should be some kind of felony where this dude, again, might even have to face the death penalty. Why? Because that's what he's putting this guy under by diming him out like that on media, because it's not just in this country, right? Everybody in the world just saw that. So now this guy and his family's lives are at risk solely for this little pissant. And they think that shit's funny with ICE. They're about to find out. Well, this could be a FAFO moment for sure.
Yeah, 100%. Jeff, your thoughts on this guy doxing a Delta team member?
Yeah, well, one, he's stupid, and someone may go talk to him about that at some point. Not that I'm endorsing any sort of violence, but he should be held criminally liable if anything happens to this guy or his family, because this is the height of irresponsibility. And his defense saying, well, you can use stuff if it's leaked, that's from the old Pentagon Papers thing. But you can also be held criminally liable for what you leak and what you put out there as well. You can't just act with impunity. If you do things that leads to somebody else being hurt or killed, you can be held responsible for that, and should be.
Yeah, well said. Well said. So I've got 2 more videos kind of on this special beginning that we're doing tonight. One of them's from Mike Sterling, and the other one is on Chris Murphy related to the Maduro stuff in particular. We've never done this before, but here's the deal. I've got, I don't know, maybe 10 things in tonight's sit rep. We haven't even started the sit rep yet. And then we've got the main topic. And I want to make sure that we're respectful of Jeff and Randy's time. And I really, really don't want to see Jeff tomorrow night with 2 black eyes because his wife beat him up for staying on here with all of us too long. So I'm going to give you a choice. I'm going to cover these next 2 things. I'm going to get Randy's input. I'm going to get Jeff's input on both of them. And between now and then, you get the vote. If you want the sit rep, we'll go ahead and do the sit rep, but it's likely Jeff for sure will have to leave before we get into the main topic. If you'd prefer us to get into the main topic of the night right away, I'm here for the long haul. Put a number 2 in the live chat. So 1, if you want us to do the sit rep, it's likely Jeff won't be able to stay for the main topic. Maybe Randy too. I will. Or 2, if you want me to skip the sit rep and go straight to the main topic of the night. So check this out. This is from Mike Sterling. Let me get the right one up here. And this person, America Meme, says, I don't think Seth Harp thought this through. 33 seconds.
Let me get this straight. You think this man commands the world's premier counterterrorism unit? The one that snatches communist dictators from their beds at 2 a.m. inside the presidential palace on a military base in the heart of Venezuela's capital? And your plan is to dox him? Good luck.
That's exactly how much thought this guy put into it too. That's exactly.
Let me get this.
So that's pretty good. And then the last one on this Maduro topic, Democrat Chris Murphy, who opposed the successful raid to capture Maduro, gets confronted by CNN for previously calling for him to be outed. Before I play the video, I don't know if you all caught this, Jeff and Randy, but I know you caught the part where Trump didn't inform Congress that he was going after Maduro, but mere minutes before our guys put the cuffs on Maduro, Hakeem Jeffries tried to contact Maduro's team to tell him that he was in imminent danger and that we were fixing to kidnap him, which proves why we didn't share the information with the Congress. But what a scumbag, anti-American piece of
no, Chris. He's a criminal.
Arrested.
He's a criminal. That's why he was alerting him, because he's a criminal and he knows that guy has information that could put them all in jail.
Well, and Jeffrey should be put in jail for that because he put American soldiers' lives at risk for his own political purposes.
Yeah,
that was it.
Unbelievable. So, I mean, Chris Murphy's a total jerk off from Connecticut, but here you go, 47 seconds. You know when you're getting called out by CNN that you're really on the wrong side of history.
In 2019, you wrote an op-ed and you called for Maduro to be gone. You said, let's get one thing straight. There should no longer be any debate about Maduro's lack of democratic legitimacy. The Trump administration is right to put restoring Venezuelan democracy at the center of our approach to this crisis. A return to a stable democracy is in the interest of the Venezuelan people and the United States and the hemisphere. We don't know what's going to happen with regard to the civilian leadership there. Tom Cotton was just here saying that he hopes that there are democratic elections. Isn't that what you want?
Well, the rest of that article was a criticism of President Trump's early moves to saber rattle around regime change.
Oh my, and it's typical, just complete bullshit. But Jeff, go ahead and speak to that. We'll wrap up on Maduro.
Well, I think what the Trump administration should have done is said, today we executed a warrant for the arrest of Maduro based on Joe Biden's indictment of him for drug trafficking, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and saved the United States $25 million reward that Joe Biden had offered for Maduro's arrest. So not only did we execute the warrant from the indicted criminal, we saved us $25 million in the process. They need to put it all on Biden. Say, Biden indicted him, we arrested him.
There you go. Randy?
Well, I mean, I can't add any more. I mean, it's ridiculous that, one, he's not already in jail. I mean,
yeah, fair enough. And by the way, I forgot to mention to you guys, I've got a couple people that are looking to open a Survival Dispatch News, Command 11 swag shop. So, T-shirts and hats and all that kind of stuff. Cindy and I just do not have the bandwidth to handle it. We had a bunch of Survival Dispatch swag back when I acquired the company. I think we had somewhere around 1,000 T-shirts, and they sold in the blink of an eye. But it's a lot of time and effort that we don't have. One of the T-shirts that is under consideration, I think it's going to get pretty good traction, is "You're on mute, Jeff." That's the shirt. You're on mute, Jeff.
Dude, there's somebody that says it every night now. And even when it was just me and you, I think on New Year's Eve, there was somebody still saying, "Jeff's on mute."
Yeah. So I mean, it could be a bestseller. I mean, I guess we'll find out.
I'm saving all you guys the joy of me yelling at my dogs, belching, farting, making all those gross noises that guys do.
That's too funny. All right, so the twos have the win. So we're going to go right into our main topic of the night, which is the next episode in our Long War series. So this is a 144 episode series that Khalid and I wrote back in the spring. And one of the problems with doing a video series is that somebody will see, okay, this episode's part of this series, doesn't matter how long it is or isn't, and they won't watch it because they feel like they didn't have the context from the previous episodes in the series. So we did one thing very specifically, and I'll try to get through this as quickly as I can, but all 144 episodes are predicated on being post 9/11 2.0. So if you know what 9/11 2.0 represents, you can watch these videos in any order. You can watch some of them, all of them, individual. It doesn't matter. They'll all have value. So let me give you the Cliff Notes version of what 9/11 2.0 is. So Khalid's intel from on the ground in Afghanistan, from putting basically spies in terrorist camps, is that the jihadis want to attack 10 to 15 tier 2 American cities, simultaneously across the country. By the way, this is nothing new. The oldest reports that I could find on this strategy actually are 2006. So Al Qaeda in particular has been playing this for quite some time. But as we know now, all of these jihadis are under the banner of the Islamic Army. So Al Qaeda, Arabian Peninsula, ISIS, ISKP, Taliban, TTP, Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, and the list goes on, sort of thing. So what does this look like? So you've got 10 to 15 tier 2 cities, population 100 to 500K. In each of those cities, you have 10 to 15 sleeper cells. In each of the sleeper cells, you have 4 to 12 jihadis. If you do the math, it's probably 2,000 to 3,000 highly trained, not just terrorists, but essentially, operators, Islamic Army operators. So it will start with attacks on soft targets like schools. They absolutely want to kill as many defenseless Americans as possible. So that is especially related to schools. However, when you look at the blueprints for 9/11 2.0, which Mumbai 2008 was the first big one. It wasn't the first CCTA, but it was a big one. Yes, the primary attacks are significant, but the secondary and tertiary attacks are even more significant. So what that means is, picture this. You have a van pulls into a school that's labeled for an HVAC company. They quickly get out, put a ladder up against the school. They go up on the roof. They cut the ductwork open. They put a time-released sarin canister, or canisters, plural, in the ductwork. They get back down again. Then the canisters go off. Maybe some people manage to exit the building, and if so, they get killed on the spot. But most of them will die inside of 3 minutes because of the exposure to a nerve gas, which essentially shuts down your central nervous system, and your DRT dead right there. And it'll go subcutaneous through skin. It's not something that you can be saved by, a full load CBRN mask. However, they will sit there and wait for the authorities to show up, the first responders to show up. And when they do, imagine that van being full of bombs, essentially, one big VBIED, so vehicle-borne IED. So I've been telling people since we started this series, and we're on episode 80 something now. Actually, this should be episode 84 if memory serves me right, that we have this thing called normalcy bias. Something bad happens. The human mind, the human psyche wants to get back to normality as quick as possible. So somebody who's close to the X or on the X and they actually survive, they go, whew, thank God, dodged a bullet. And then, of course, when the first responders show up, they're very happy to see them. If people retain nothing but this following tidbit, then we've done our job. And that is, if you are so unfortunate to be anywhere near the X or on the X and you survive one of these attacks, get as far away as fast as you possibly can, because the secondary and tertiary attacks are going to be even worse. Number one. Number two, do not approach any first responders, no matter how much you want to do that. We have had a ton of uniforms stolen over the past 18 plus months. So we've had tons of break-ins, National Guard armories, where multiple uniforms from National Guard have been stolen. We've had lots of dry cleaners broken into, where law enforcement and paramedic uniforms have been stolen. We have vehicles from all three of those categories that have been stolen, whether it be Humvees, ambulances, or cop cars. This is not something new. This has been part of the jihadi repertoire forever and a day. So even like 10/7 in Israel, the people who were smart enough to see the paragliders coming in with rifles that ran to the parking lot so they could exfil immediately were stopped by two Hamas terrorists dressed up as Israeli cops that said, whoa, you can't go any further than this. And then the rest of the team, the Hamas team, jumped out of the bushes and slaughtered all of them in their cars. So not a new strategy. If you look at Mumbai 2008, what makes it complex is, and what makes it coordinated too, for that matter, is a remote command and control team. So in Mumbai 2008, there was a command and control team in eastern Pakistan and another one in northern Afghanistan. What's a command and control team? These are jihadis who are monitoring social media. They're monitoring live news feeds. They're monitoring body cameras on the jihadis and relaying instructions and saying things like, hey, don't go to target A, go to target B instead, because whatever is happening, so they can pivot very quickly on a dime. And imagine the size of this command and control team that's controlling 2,000-3,000 jihadis that are all jacked up on drugs that, minimize their pain levels, completely nuke any hunger that they may have. It essentially gives them somewhere between a 4 and 8 hour window, at least the ones that are drugged up, to just be killing machines, basically. So imagine now they attack a bunch of targets, they keep moving, but they converge in each of those cities on the level 1 trauma center. All of these tier 2 cities that have one level 1 trauma center typically don't have any other big cities anywhere near that they could call upon for mutual assistance. They don't have other level 1 trauma centers that people could be sent to. So what does that mean? That means somebody who's grievously injured, who would normally stand a chance of surviving by being taken to a level 1 trauma center right away, that option's off the table. So now you're triaging people and deciding who's going to survive and who's not going to survive. So when they take the level 1 trauma centers, they will siege them, and it will take days in some instances to unsiege those buildings. So while they're sieged, they'll be booby trapped. There'll be between 3,000 and 5,000 people, hostages in each of these, so staff and patients. And they'll booby trap the HVAC systems with sarin or other chemical agents. They will all be wearing suicide vests with dead man switches. So that means that if we shoot one of them and they die and they fall over, they blow up and kill as many people in close proximity as they possibly can. It'll be a massive undertaking to unsiege them. We need very specialized training, guys who are trained very specifically to take out the bad guys without killing the good guys, the hostages in the process. Probably LAPD's SWAT team could handle a level 1 trauma center like this. The FBI's HRT teams, there's 4 of them, hostage rescue teams. They have 140 assets. They're trained for this. But Delta Force, who just took Maduro, are the cream of the crop. And look how they went in and managed to, essentially cherry pick Maduro and his wife out with 0 casualties on our side. I mean, they live for this stuff. This is what Delta Team does. So that's what 9/11 2.0 looks like. And now that you have that piece of context, tonight's main topic is red states versus blue states as far as their economies are concerned post 9/11 2.0. So 9/11 2.0, for starters, won't be one and done. It will set off terrorist attacks for generations thereafter. The Obama/Biden installation for the past 4 years allowed hundreds of thousands of criminals into the country. So Joe Kent, National Counterterrorism Center, head of the National Counterterrorism Center, a few weeks ago in front of Congress, said, hey, we have a list of 2,000 ISIS and Al-Qaeda guys that came from Afghanistan that Biden let go. We have another 16,000 ISIS and Al-Qaeda that came from other countries they let go. We have Mayorkas's DHS saying that they let 200,000 SIAs into the country, so special interest aliens. And to be an SIA, you have to be a terrorist or associate of a terrorist organization. Those are just people we had in custody, right, that we touched. Doesn't include the people who just walked across the border. So 9/11 2.0 is not a one and done, number one. So there will be ongoing attacks afterwards, which will continue to have economic fallout. So basically, you're going to have states that are locked down hard. Think California, think Charlie 19, think of the damage that was done to the economy there versus states like Florida here, where for all intents and purposes, we were supposed to give X amount of days, to stop the spread of Charlie 19. And in reality, after about a week, everybody in Florida was like, yeah, we're not doing this. And even Ron DeSantis said he passed a law making it illegal for counties and cities to charge anybody for, violating these Charlie 19 rules that some of the Democrat centers like Miami-Dade had put out there. So essentially the gist of tonight is going to be, the states that have less economic barriers before 9/11 2.0 will recover much faster after 9/11 2.0, because states like California, I mean, they're literally trapped in processes and regulations that hamstring them. And if you want a great example, think of the fires in Southern California last year. There were all kinds of firefighters came from Washington State and Oregon State. And the first thing they had to do was go to San Francisco and get a license that they were environmentally friendly vehicles before they were allowed to carry on to Southern California to aid in the firefighting. So this is just a really good tangible example. So I broke this into sections by time, okay? So the first segment is the first 72 hours, shock control and cash flow. So a multi-city terror event is going to trigger, immediate uncertainty, and uncertainty freezes people's spending, hiring, movement. So it's not hard to imagine the first states to restore clarity, they're going to kick things into gear faster, which in turn will attract people from other states that are sick and tired of being locked down. Not in the first 72 hours, but it's planting the seed for that. So generally speaking, if you look at conservative states, I'm not saying Republican, Democrat. I've been saying for 25 plus years, they're two different sides of the same coin. It's all political theater, but we do have vastly different economies and rules and regulations in conservative states here, especially in the Southeast. So those states that lean into what I would call, we always hear this thing, continuity, government continuity, right? Like, what's the continuity plan if the country is attacked as far as leadership is concerned? So there's a whole protocol of where the president is taken, where the vice president is taken. They're not together to ensure that we have continuity of government. Well, think about continuity as far as us, the little people, and, just your John Q average. So essentially, when you have simplified, emergency rules, and you've got private sector logistics that aren't cut off at the ankles like FEMA, or maybe just incompetent like FEMA, whatever you want to say, versus the blue state models where what do they do whenever the shit hits the fan? They start cranking things down. They tighten the controls, they expand the rules, and in many instances, they wait for federal direction, which Lord only knows when that might come. Just look at what happened with Hurricane Helene in West North Carolina. We had doctors who were there voluntarily treating people who were shut down because they were making FEMA and the state of North Carolina look bad because they couldn't get out of their own way to help their own citizens. And I know Dr. Molly, one of them, vis-a-vis my relationship with Lieutenant Colonel Doc Pete Chamber. So economically speaking, in the first 72 hours, beyond the horror, what's the economic stuff? And we can speak to this here in Florida because of hurricanes, forever and ever. So you're going to see people reeling from this economically. There'll be long lines to get gas, if there is even any gas, because when the supply chain is shut down for several days or a week, there might not even be any gas there. You'll see store shelves stripped. I mean, it's amazing how fast the shelves here get stripped of water, milk, bread, eggs. Like, it disappears in the blink of an eye when a hurricane's fixing to hit us, like right on top of us. You're going to see things like banks not necessarily being able to give you cash withdrawals, because the whole process that keeps them supplied with cash is probably going to be hung up as well. There's going to be interruptions in people's jobs where they're told to just stay home. And so the practical question here, it's really not partisan. It's not partisan theory. It's which of these systems keeps everything that's essential moving while keeping the violence contained. So, Jeff, I'm going to come to you first. What's the biggest thing that a government can do at any level in the first 24 hours that restores some element of normality, economic, measures, like that people can actually go and get food and water as opposed to being told shelter in place?
Well, I think they need to establish a visible presence, but without locking people down. You put cops on the street, you put vehicles out there at the intersections, but they're not stopping people. You don't want them to be your prison guards. They're just there to make sure we're here, we're on the job. If something comes up, we're prepared to handle it. And that way, it kind of restores the faith in that the government can protect you, at least to a certain degree. But if all they do is clamp down on the citizens, it's like, why are you punishing the people who didn't commit an act of terrorism? Because that's what it boils down to. I think it's kind of a show of friendly force.
What a great answer. That's an awesome answer. So second question, then I'll go to Randy for a couple questions. What are 3 supply chain choke points that you can think of that fail first in big metropolitan areas after any type of emergency, whether it's a terrorist attack or, Mother Nature?
Fuel is going to be a big one, but that one also depends on, everybody's going to rush to fill up their cars. I get that. But if your car's already full, you don't have any way of getting extra gasoline and storing it. Most people don't. Whereas you can hoard food. You can buy a month's worth of food at one time and put it in your garage. You can't do that with gasoline. So I think the main one is going to be food, just because people can buy it if it's available. Again, you're limited in how much gasoline you can buy. There's other things that requires a personal infrastructure, so to speak, to keep it and to maintain it. You fill up your car tank, there's 20 gallons, and once it's full, you have nowhere else to put it. But food, you can just stack to the rafters, and a lot of people will be tempted to do that. Like we saw during COVID, people were buying a year's worth of frickin' toilet paper, for crying out loud.
Yeah, or more. I can't remember who it was. I was talking to somebody last week, Jeff, and they were like, yeah, we'll never have to buy toilet paper again. But they did the smart thing. The production, at least here in Georgia, for toilet paper is concerned, these paper plants are either tooled up for, home toilet paper or commercial toilet paper, but not they don't have all of the machines in both of them. There was a ton of commercial toilet paper, just didn't fit the roll in your bathroom.
Those great big rolls. But right. Like Mike Sterling said, says whenever there's bad weather, people stock up on milk, bread, and eggs. And he goes, because apparently French toast is the only way you can survive.
We used to always joke in Florida here that it's a little known fact, but when a hurricane's fixing to hit us, we haven't been able to explain this, but the cows stop making milk and the chickens stop laying eggs. It's a crazy thing, So Randy, first question for you. How do emergency declarations help, in your opinion, versus how do they get abused, especially in these high regulation states like California, Illinois, New York?
Are you talking about the emergency alert system, or what are you?
No, emergency restrictions like declarations, whether it be martial law, what you can and cannot do, curfews, those sort of.
I honestly don't think any of them are helpful, honestly. Now, there is something to be said about, like there in Florida, if there's a hurricane coming, and certainly if it's a bad enough one, them trying to get people out of a certain area. But again, it comes down, you can't make people leave if they don't want to. Same thing with martial law. I have mixed emotions about martial law. I saw it in Iraq. I saw it put down, and I understood why it was. And honestly, I was on the big side, or I was the Bigfoot, right? So it didn't bother me whatsoever. I was glad we had it in, but that's because we were enforcing it on someone else. And to that degree, I think Jeff was exactly spot on with his answer about that, right? They should have police officers out there, maybe even some firemen. But martial law or all these other mechanisms, again, my saying, right? If they tell us it's in the interest of public safety, you should run very far away because they're full of crap. It's not for the interest of public safety. It's for them to in place control measures. So
Yeah, and like Rand or Jeff always says, it's not in the Constitution either, right? It's part of the Insurrection Act, is where martial law comes from. And
Well, that's exactly right, because our forefathers knew, right? They'd already been through martial law. I don't know what it was called back then, but they already understood that very well, and that's exactly why it wasn't in the Constitution.
And John Curry, thank you for the tip, but he makes a comment. He's one of our guardians. It's not that, Chris. People just crave French toast during major weather events, milk, bread, eggs. So you're part of the Mike Sterling school of thought there. And next question for you, Randy, is what should families do immediately to avoid getting trapped by panic buying and travel restrictions? And let me just preface that by saying, when we have a major, like a Cat 4 or 5 hurricane bearing down, we're also used to having hurricanes that it's a very Floridian thing, which you're aware of. It's like, yeah, whatever. We have all of our stuff, let's just get it over with. But when it's a Cat 4 or Cat 5 and you start getting mandatory evacuations and people ignore them until the last minute, they go to leave. Like I remember Charlie, which was 2005, I-95 from here to the Carolinas, I-75 from here to Tennessee, parking lot the entire way. There's always that window of opportunity, right, where people are just first getting that information, and a lot of people haven't been able to process it, that's the time to get out of Dodge, right?
Heck, I would say even right now, something's going to come down. So, but yes, you definitely, I would say if we have some sort of September 11th, 9/11 2.0 attack that, as I've said many times, if it's even halfway successful, you're going to want to get out in the first 4 hours. So prepping would be like, if you're not going to leave, obviously you should be stocking up on stuff that you're going to need to survive. We've gone through the list many times. You have it online. You can Google. There's all kinds of food and water, rice, beans, all that good stuff. You need to be stocking up on that now if you haven't. And even if it's only a little bit each month, right, it will build up in time. And hopefully you've been doing that. It goes with the same thing with anything else. If it's something you're going to need to survive, including medications, you probably should stock up now, because you're not going to have time once it happens. And just like you mentioned, when they finally made everybody leave and all the people waited till the last minute, because I can attest, hey, Floridians are nuts. They are completely nuts. Because when I showed up there, I had to go through MacDill Air Force Base's hurricane brief. And when these idiots start telling me when a hurricane comes in, don't think hundreds of miles, think tens of miles. I'm like, are you crazy? Tens of miles, I'm still going to be under the cloud. Well, that is exactly what they said. Think in terms of tens of miles and not hundreds of miles. And of course, I was married at the time and we had young children. And me and my ex-wife looked at each other and said, people lost their mind. When a hurricane comes here, I'm not even thinking hundreds of miles. Let's get on a plane and fly back to Texas and go visit family. So if you're not preparing now, you're falling behind, because if you wait until whatever said event happens, even if it is a hurricane, it's too late.
Well, Jeff lived here in Florida, and when the Trayvon Martin thing was going on, he wasn't too far from that. Jeff, your thoughts on Floridians' lackadaisical attitude towards hurricanes?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of Floridians that when some will panic. Usually the transfers or I should say the newcomers will freak out, but a lot of the people who have lived there their whole lives are like, just put your food in plastic tubs, so if your roof gets blown off, your food doesn't get ruined. They're pretty nonchalant about it because they've just been through it so many times.
Yeah.
To that point, when people go to buy a house, that's generally one of the questions, right? I would never thought of this because, of course, I'm from Texas, been several other states. But one of the things they ask is, how many hurricanes has this thing survived?
Hey, legit question. I had a Spanish villa that was built in 1905 in the historic district here, and it had been heavily renovated, but how many hurricanes have there been since 1905? And it was structurally sound. So, but
I was going through Coral Gables, and you've got some of these older homes, And then when you really start looking at them, the walls are poured concrete.
Yep.
You know, those things are freaking indestructible. You may blow out the windows and maybe take the roof off. The walls ain't going anywhere.
Yeah, 100%. So we're
That's
going to move
another level of building code for sure.
We're going to move into segment number 2, which is week 1, supply chains pick winners. And well, you know what? I'm going to cover the first few points and you'll connect the dots on why I said supply chains pick winners. So once the immediate danger passes, the next battle is going to be movement of goods. We've seen it countless times again, thanks to hurricanes. So goods, fuel, labor. So states that reduce friction for things like trucking, warehousing, energy distribution clearly will restart commerce faster than states that layer permits and restrictions on top of chaos. So for many years, people used to make fun of us in Florida because our building codes were so terrible. A lot of the homes that lost their entire roofing system, so not just the shingles, but the trusses and everything, you know, you had trusses that had one toenail, so one 3.5 inch or 3.25 inch RDOX framing nail holding a truss down to the top of the wall, nothing more. We went from that extreme to the other extreme that Florida now has amongst the strictest building codes in the country. But we have 2 sets of building codes. So we have Miami-Dade building codes and we have Florida building codes. Miami-Dade is the strictest building codes in the entire world. And the amount of cost that it adds to construction projects is astronomical. So, you know, it's the reason I mention it because that's a very blue part of Florida. It's a big blue dot in the state of Florida. Gainesville, in particular, Orlando, and Miami-Dade would be the three big Democrat strongholds, whereas the rest of us are real Americans. TM Randy Nance. So, essentially, when you fracture the recovery, you know, phases by telling businesses they have to comply with this new rule, that new regulation. Well, if you're higher up in the supply chain and you're thinking, okay, do I send my product to this state or that state? They choose the winners. They choose the states that have the least amount of impediments to them delivering their product to the point of sale. So it's not rocket science to put this stuff together. It's not even something that people are necessarily thinking of in political terms. They're literally looking at it like, hey, it's and here's Miami-Dade again, by the way. It's a whole lot easier to deliver fuel and food, you know, to somewhere, let's say, like, I don't know, let's say Ocala, Florida, very conservative. It's a whole lot easier to deliver stuff there than it is to Miami-Dade. And we only have so much supply in our hands anyways. I'm just going to send everything to Miami-Dade, maximize my profits, minimize my headache sort of thing. So essentially, as that goes on day after day, it becomes very visible to everybody in these different areas. You've got, you know, infrastructure being repaired faster. You've got stocks being shelved faster. You've got stores reopening faster versus, you know, the lockdown socialist commie states like California, where, you know, you have to have this approval now. And all that does is just grinds things to a halt. And I really think that a national level event like 9/11 2.0 will probably expose this to more people than anything else in our history as far as the insanity of these blue states treating their citizens like they are children. So, Jeff, coming back to you, and kind of similar question, a little bit different, but what do you think are the top 3 state level decisions that can either speed up or choke the supply chain? You're on mute, Jeff.
The biggest thing that screws up supply chains immediately after a hurricane or some natural disaster are the stupid anti-price gouging laws they put in. I remember there was, it may have been in Georgia, power was wiped out. I mean, thousands upon thousands of people had no electricity. Well, some guys, I think from either maybe Texas, Louisiana, something like that, went down to the local Home Depot and bought up all the generators they could get, put them on a truck, drove to the disaster area and sold them. Did they sell them for more than they paid for them? Well, yeah, absolutely. They still had to rent a truck and drive halfway around the country, across the country. And it may have been something that was normally $600 and they sold it for $900. But they had to take it halfway around across the country. And if you really, really need a generator, you'll pay $900, because if you go to your local Home Depot, there are none, because they've sold out in about 2 seconds. Actually, they probably sold out before the storm even got there. Or people would come in with a truckload of water. Are they going to sell it for a profit? Well, yeah, because they're not necessarily a charity. But if people really need it, they'll pay for it. But they do that to, quote unquote, save the people. But what they're doing is denying them a more efficient way of getting supplies in there, because FEMA can't do it or won't do it. Walmart and those guys will be bringing in big trucks of stuff, but then you've got to go to a Walmart store and go to all this other stuff. It's just another option to bring in more stuff. And the more stuff you bring in, the lower the prices go, because it's supply and demand. If you're the only guy selling bottled water, yeah, you can charge what you want. But if it's you and then there's 50 other guys also selling bottled water and you want to get rid of yours, you've got to lower your price to make it more, it's just simple supply and demand.
Yeah,
they do that every time, and every time it just freaking backfires.
Yeah, it's not complex. Second question for you, Jeff, is how does energy policy directly translate into speed of economic rebound after attacks?
Well, energy policy, you're talking about gasoline or electricity or what?
Both, all forms of energy.
Gasoline, you've got to give, refiners and everybody, the incentive to have a viable stockpile. They've got to have some storage. You got to have some available so that, say, storm hits San Antonio and everybody runs and sucks up all the gas at the gas stations, because that's what people do. You've got to have a ready supply that it can be brought in to kind of rebuild the stock, so that people can go feel confident that they can go get gas if they need to. When people see a gas line, they get in it.
Yeah.
Not necessarily because they need gas, because they're afraid, well, if I don't, there won't be any at all tomorrow. So if they do it to where they can make bringing in reserve fuel quicker and more efficient, that tells people I don't have to panic buy. And for electricity, you've got to bring in power. Now, it may be limited. You may end up doing rolling blackouts with people, but you got to explain to them and say, okay, the system's collapsed. We're bringing it up, which means, sorry, folks, you can't run your air conditioners until we get this thing figured out. But you can run your refrigerator and keep your baby's formula cold or whatever you need to do. But you got to bring something back just so the people can see it and realize, okay, it's going to be all right. Because at that point, you're managing expectations.
Yeah. So I was born in 1969. I'll be 57 a month from today. And I remember the gas lineups in the mid 70s, early 70s.
And the thing is, we were not really out of gas.
Yeah.
The OPEC wouldn't sell us gas, but petroleum is fungible. OPEC was 25-30% of production.
Yeah.
Okay, where's the other 70? It's still there. And okay, so we buy from the 70 and other people buy the OPEC oil.
Right.
It was just panic.
Yeah, 100%. Randy, first question for you. How does local law enforcement capacity and prosecution policies affect business reopening decisions? In other words, draconian versus non-draconian.
We kind of saw that during COVID, right? I mean,
we did.
I mean, that's literally I couldn't describe it any better than that. The sad part about it wasn't people being able to keep their business. Some people wanted to keep their stuff open and they weren't allowed to. So that is where that becomes a problem, and again, we have never seen anything like that in this country because it hadn't existed before. This was a free enterprise and Businesses thrived in this country. It wasn't until recent times now that they're stifling it all. And then we look at the way different states and different governments deal with it. It comes down to let's just take California, for example, with the wildfires, right? They had no water. Why was that? Well, as it turns out, they turned it all off. They pushed all the reserves out in the ocean, and that's how the blue state handled it. We look at what happened in North Carolina, even though that's supposed to be a red state, right? It's like purple or something. They didn't handle it very well. They let those people suffer, and we even heard the stories of, when FEMA came out, if they found out you were a Trump supporter, they just passed you by, your property by, and that comes down to nobody being held accountable.
Yeah, true story. I can comment on North Carolina and what's happened there. So there are people in North Carolina that are called halfbackers. And these are people who retired, moved from the Northeast to Florida, felt that they were too far away from family and went halfway back. North Carolina is infested now with a ton of liberals from the Northeast who have voted for the same shit that drove them out of their original state, which is, what it's like because the Californians coming into Texas, for example. Second question, Randy, I just want to hone in a little bit on your advice for prepping and stocking up, but I want to put a bit different twist on it. What should people be stocking up on right now as best as they can in light of what's coming, that live paycheck to paycheck, that are having a hard time making ends meet? What can those people do, Randy?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, hopefully you've already started, because obviously if you don't have a lot of means or resources and pretty much everything you have is going somewhere else already, it's something that you just have to be small. You have to, it's no different than, you hear about people that started investing, right? They started with zero. And then, for those first couple of years, small increments all the way up. And if you, for those that don't have a lot of money or their bills are already taking it, you still need to water and food, right? And those would be the top two, right, that you would want to start now, because trying to go beyond that, you're not going to have the money to do that. So I would just start very small with buying some extra water and some extra food, however that is. And again, for the food part, you're not going to stack up meat in your freezer if you have one, because if you lose power, that's not going to do you any good. I'm talking about, maybe cans of Spam, maybe cans of chicken, maybe cans of tuna, all those things that you would be able to keep for a period of time. You don't need something, it's great that Carnival and others have 25 and longer shelf lives. Yeah. But for this instance, you don't need 25 years, right? You only need something that will get you through the next couple of years or a couple of months, really, is what we're hoping, right? If things go bad and the power goes down, that could be months. Again, if it was a total, like they took out those 9 substations, we know for a fact we don't have any on hand, and there's like a 48-month backup for back order on getting a new one. So what that means is we're going to have to piecemeal stuff together. I have no doubt that we'll get it up and running at some point with a little American ingenuity, but you're talking months, most likely, several months. So you need to make sure you have enough food and water to get through those few months. And beyond that, if it's the power, have a pup tent. And the reason I say a pup tent, because if it's in the middle of dead winter and you've got no power, your house is going to get very cold inside. But if you and your wife or you and whoever got in a pup tent, that thing pretty much stays at a temperature that will keep you alive inside that little tent, and you could sleep in there nicely. And I don't have good advice for summertime, because hot is hot is hot, and it's hard to get away from that. But you will be in the shade. But again, what you're going to really focus on is food and water, because that is going to be the most important thing for survival.
Just really quickly. So number one, Carnival, Wasatch Wagyu are premium products. So for people who are tight, it's probably not a product that they're going to want to stack up on. And what I usually say, Randy, is look, like skip your $5-6 coffee if you're drinking them. Get an extra case of water each time you go to the grocery. Those sort of things. It's like eating an elephant one bite at a time, right? And
or like, I forgot one. Here's another cheap one, right? Peanut butter. You got peanut butter and honey. They're both still fairly easy to buy. You can get some extra one of those. You may have to ration out, but you'd be amazed at how far peanut butter can get you. And I know this from the Q course.
Awesome.
So I know it works.
The other piece I'll add before we get into segment number 3, and you brought up the pup tent idea. It's a great idea, Randy. If you're down a level from that and you have a Mylar blanket, which costs next to nothing, I mean, we used to give them away with every order we sent out, and you get under that Mylar blanket with a simple candle, it'll raise the temperature under that significantly. It'll vary depending on where you are and how cold it is, but you can quite easily raise the temperature 15, 20 degrees with nothing more than a candle under a Mylar blanket. That's a super cheap way of being prepared in that regard. So segment 1 tonight was the first 72 hours after 9/11 2.0. Segment 2 that we just wrapped up is 1 week after 9/11 2.0. Segment 3 is 1 month after 9/11 2.0, and I titled it Jobs Move and Tax Bases Shift. So over the first month, employers, make hard decisions based on downtime, liability, the ability to operate. And when blue state systems, for lack of a better term, add cost, mandates, or uncertainty, companies shift investment and hiring, and they'll do it really quickly to states that offer stability and predictable rules. It's a big part of the reason you've seen so much manufacturing leave California for Texas in particular, or businesses in general, not just manufacturing businesses. So essentially, conservative state recoveries, can accelerate because of things like access to private capital. You've got some path, to profit and normalcy, economically speaking, whereas the blue states, the whole thing is slowed down by the burden of public systems. They can't pivot quickly. Their emergency spending becomes a substitute for real productivity, which of course has all kinds of inflationary problems that come with it. And at the end of the day, families experience this in the differences in rent in blue versus conservative state, wages, and not just really wages, too simple of a word, but buying power, school disruptions, crime patterns. And I mean, at the end of the day, the reality is that people are just going to migrate where there's greater opportunity. It's a double-edged sword that we've seen in Texas and in Florida. When Cindy and I were growing up, we're both the same age, the population of Florida was 5 million people. And the way it is now, between the 2020 census, tourists, which we always have here in large numbers, illegals, which we have here in large numbers, as well as transient people who never officially changed their state of residence from wherever they came from to Florida, they estimate that there's typically 32 million people in state at any point in time here in the state of Florida. The reason I said that there was only 5 million when Cindy and I were young is that our infrastructure has grown, but not a whole lot. I-75 and I-95 have added an extra lane here and there, but we don't have the infrastructure to support more people here in Florida because it's absolutely just skyrocketed rent and home prices. 3-bedroom apartment that's nothing special in Daytona, I call it Dirtona because it's dirty, but it averages around $3,000. I mean, that's a lot of freaking money, to rent somewhere. So, Jeff, coming to you first on this, in your experience and history, what industries are typically the first to move from highly regulated areas to highly not regulated areas? And you're on mute.
I knew that. For the ones that move fastest are probably going to be financial services because it's easier for them to move. They don't have a factory full of equipment that they have to pick up and then haul down somewhere. And, all you need is an office building, and you can move from New York to Dallas, which we're seeing now. JP Morgan Chase now has more employees in Dallas, Texas, the Dallas area, than it does in New York City.
Wow.
So it's much easier for them to move. And second would be technology companies. If you look at, especially if you're a programmer, software, again, there's no factory to move. The people work on computers. Well, a lot of them work from home. And when you start getting into heavy industry, that takes longer because it's just more of an ordeal to move a factory or a steel mill or a smelter or something like that. And then there's environmental regulations attached to those things that, doesn't matter what state you're in, you're going to have some of that just because of the EPA.
How do you think state taxes and labor rules will amplify the damage after 9/11 2.0?
No, they'll make it, for the blue states, they'll make it much, much worse. Because, businesses go where it's easier to do business. And if they're a local service provider type thing, yeah, they'll keep something there. But if, you look at State Farm can sell insurance in Arizona, they don't have to have a huge presence here. They have the local State Farm guys, but their headquarters can be anywhere. And states that make it difficult, especially states that say, okay, we don't want people going into, we're going to close down office spaces. We're going to close down downtown. Well, if I'm a company and that's my headquarters, you're basically saying you're shutting down my company. So what I'm going to do is say, okay, everybody, we're going to close that one down, and we're going to be opening up across the line in the next state because of that. Because to obey those rules means you go out of business, and people aren't going to do that voluntarily.
Yeah, and these, career politicians, professional actors, but politicians have no clue what it takes to own and run and be successful in business.
No, they've never had to meet a payroll.
Correct. So, Randy, first question for you is, how can churches reduce the economic pressure on those people who are affected the most, affected the worst in these blue states?
Well, I don't know. It depends on if they make laws or rules that they can't do it. But basically, they would do what churches already do, right? I mean, a lot of churches, I know they do in this area. Pardon me. But, doing like you'll have some of them that serve the homeless, right? 3 meals a day. It may not be in the same church. I think here they kind of rotate around, right? And there's a certain amount of them that do it. And I think that would be one way, because really there's a lot of ways you can help people, but and certainly when something like this, and then in down times, no different than our own depression back in the 30s, right? People needed food. And when your average citizen right here in America can't buy the food that they need to feed their families, that's a big problem. And so you would have to start there, right? We'd be able to feed the people, right? Because as you always say, you can't fight if you're hungry. And there is some truth to that. And it certainly is. And we also know it's like accumulative. So no different than water or food. The longer you go without it, the worse it gets for you and your body and your mind. So I would say start there, and then they also, some churches have other programs. Your bigger ones have more money where they actually can help people with bill assistance or, financial assistance, we'll call it. And, some of them will be able to do that. Those would be the two areas that I think would help the most in the blue states. But again, they got to be able to get there and get to them, right? Mm-hmm. Because I don't know what happened in California. We didn't really get to see how did they recover from the fires. I don't even know, because we didn't see. It wasn't on TV. But I would say that's where churches would definitely make the biggest impact right there. Besides spreading their message.
Yeah, in Utah, you've got, of course, the Mormons, and they're the church of preppers.
Well, right? They have money, don't they? I don't think they need any help.
Well, some of their community members do. That's where I'm going with this. So you can go download their prepper handbook. I think the last time it was updated was like 2012 or something like that, and it is super comprehensive. and I can't remember if it's 1 year or 2 years worth of food for your entire family that they recommend that you have on hand. And they've got a whole process how you get to that point. But I know some Mormons, and when a family falls on hard times, the church will come together and ensure that they have food, clothing, whatever they need. They're not a drain on the public system, but other church members step in. And one of the people who was explaining it to me said it's also done very, very discreetly so that nobody's embarrassed that they got assistance with anything.
Well, sure, that's a big deal for a lot of
100%.
people.
So last question for segment number 3, Randy. In your estimation, what personal skills and trades do you think are the most portable? So not at the company, the business level, but at the individual level. Who's the most portable in our economy from a service perspective?
Do you mean to move around the country or just portable where they are?
To escape the blue states to get
see.
to the conservative states.
The workers?
Yeah, individual personal skills and trades that are the most portable.
Okay, so, well, all your trade schools, any of those, you know what I mean? Because no matter what, you're still, we'll still need all those, whether it be plumbers, you know, even bakers for bakeries, all those individual skills are basically down there that have been around since the beginning of time. Those are the most portable. Well, besides the ones that Jeff mentioned because of obvious reasons. If you're in the financial sector, it's pretty easy to move because he's right. You don't have to move all that equipment. And the same thing with the IT folks, you know, whereas factories that are building and manufacturers that are building stuff, they have to move their entire facility and everything they own inside of it and all their equipment. So that's not very easily done. So, but if you're a plumber, if you're an electrician, sure, you may have to go to a new area and start over and build up a clientele again. But you're able to do that because you have those skills. You can move very easily and go do that. And I think that would be the easiest.
Yeah, the only gotcha that I can see there's state regulations for transferring your license, those sort of things.
Well, sure. Usually those are a test, though, right? You can go into another state and take a test and get your license for that state. Is that correct? I mean, I know for insurance, life insurance, that's how it works.
It varies. Some states we have reciprocity for example. So I don't know, somebody who's, let's say, licensed as a hairdresser in Florida can pretty easily get that transferred to somewhere like Georgia, but go to California, New York, or Illinois, and it's like an act of Congress, essentially. I just want to show you all the cover of this. So that's the LDS Preparedness Manual. And this site has a special copy that they've added more to it, but you can download the PDF for free multiple places on the internet. It is literally considered, no pun intended, the Bible of preparedness. It's an extremely thorough and well put together document. So that's the end of the first 3 segments. A couple quick things here. I want to give a shout out to our friends at wasatchwagyu.com. I will put a link. I spoke to Greg from Wasatch Wagyu today. These strips that are made from Wagyu beef has a lot of good fats, and it is so supple. If you watch our podcast, you know I make sandwiches from these. Cindy started to put them on charcuterie boards. Greg puts them on charcuterie boards. Mike Glover, no word of a lie, eats 10 to 12 of these a day. It's incredible. So we have a code that expires this week. SD25 gets you 25% off. We don't get affiliate commission from these guys. We get a stipend to help us offset costs. And of course, our premier sponsor, Carnivalt, carnivalt.com. So this is 100% American meat, beef, chicken, pork, 25-year shelf life, no mRNA, no antibiotics, no histamines, none of that crap. You can use code EATMEAT, all one word, to get 10% off, except for the subscriptions. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, their wholesale costs has went up 49% year over year, January 1 to January 1. They have another, it's actually already kicked in. Their wholesale price has already gone up 15%. So between now and January 15th, they're trying to hold the line by basically selling what they bought at the lower price, but it's going up January 15th. And then the next part, of course, is that if you get a subscription because some jurisdictions don't allow a vendor to sign you up for a subscription and then change the price, you get locked in for 12 months. So if we see another 49%, the beef industry is in rough shape right now. The national herd is half of what it was in 1982. Now is the time. And y'all may have seen on one of the previous frames when I was in frame with Jeff and Randy that there was a pit bull came up to me here and was attacking me. And the reason that was is when I bent down to grab this crack cocaine, I accidentally touched their crack cocaine, which is the Carnival dog treats. They go absolutely, I've never seen our dogs react like they do for that stuff. So anyway, moving on from there, I do want to mention our private element server is up and running. I built it. It's 100% open source software. I'm a programmer, network engineer, systems engineer by trade for many decades. It's all open source code that I've studied for years. It's a fork of the Signal code base. It's ultra secure, but I put it on my own server for a very specific reason. When you sign up as a survival dispatch guardian and you get 10 channels on Element as we're rolling it out versus 6 on Signal, that covers everything under the sun from survival prepping to, threat wire bulletins, et cetera, is I get daily backups for that server. And if Big Brother were to come along and tell the internet provider to cut the pipe to our Element server, I can redeploy that image anywhere in the world in no time at all. I have 3 offshore locations that are set up. They have the right environment where I just transfer the image over. We'll be back up and running inside of a couple hours. I'm unaware of anybody else in the survival prepping space who's as insulated from Big Brother, Big Tech, censorship, suppression, deplatforming as we are. And for those of you who are part of Mike Glover's preparedness community, they will be hosted on the same server that the Survival Dispatch Guardians are on. $7.99 a month, $79.99 a year. Gets you 2 months for free. You get access to all those Guardian channels. Right now, just the Guardian channel itself, not including Crusaders, etc., 12,000 messages per week. And again, we've grown it from 6 to 10 channels. Ro and JP are the onboarding team. They're helping people right now get set up on Element. We're in a kind of soft launch phase. And once we have everybody from Signal over to Element, we'll go into a hard launch where at that point forward, everybody who signs up is brought directly into Element. It's a pretty big expense for Survival Dispatch. I'm paying for it out of my own pocket, but it's because the only thing that stays the same in the tech industry is that nothing stays the same. And I will not be put into a position like other people who've been deplatformed. I've been deplatformed. I've had countless strikes, and I pretty much had it for that. So that's why I built this private, secure community, and it is ultra secure, by the way. That's my forte. It's as deep as it gets in my wheelhouse. So with that being said, let's get into segment number 4, which is now 1 year after 9/11 2.0. 2 economies and 2 cultures out of control. So a year after the 9/11 2.0 attacks and the continual threat posture created by, a governance, test, kind of like Charlie 19, as Randy said, and states that normalize surveillance, restrictions, bureaucratic dependency, they're going to reshape your daily life into a permission-based economy where businesses and citizens operate under constant friction. States that keep continuity plans practical, on the other hand, and protect the private sector will rebuild much faster and will have much better, higher quality of services, and the economy overall be way better. But, you have this choice of prioritizing local control versus federal control. And if you ask me, nobody does law enforcement better than our sheriffs and city police forces as far as what's going to affect you on a day-to-day basis the most. Just giving that as an example, like stuff that's local, it just works better because we are the United States of America for a reason. We are 50 relatively autonomous states with very different cultures in some of those states. And what works in one jurisdiction isn't going to work in another, let alone even, fly as far as people are concerned. So the 1 year mark is a big deal because in that year, now the big players who are pissed off at the blue states locking them down. Think, Tesla, think Apple, all of these companies who had stuff in California that have moved it to Texas. And there's plenty more examples. A year is enough for some pretty big companies to leave those restrictive blue states and get to conservative states that are much more business friendly, where that in turn, now your conservative ideology, it's probably a libertarian ideology is probably a better way to say it. It turns into money, and money turns into power. And now we get into the next part where it's this self-reinforcing, investment flows to stability, skilled workers relocate to opportunity, and states that choose control end up essentially managing decline. And I will say, from a business perspective, because I was a business development executive in addition to being a tech guy, is you cannot cut your way to prosperity. I don't care if it's government or private institutions. All it does is slow the bleeding down, and you can't cut your way to prosperity. So I want to come to you first, Jeff, with a question on permissibility. What does a permission-based economy look like day to day for average families? So a lockdown economy where we've got all this additional overhead of rules and regulations, what does that look like for an average family?
It's going to be very frustrating because Americans aren't used to saying "Mother, may I" when they do things. And I think there's going to be a lot of pushback, and there's going to be a lot of tension as a result of that. The police are going to, or whoever is going to say, you got to do X, and people go, I don't want to do X. I want to do Y. Well, too bad. You can't do Y. Well, watch me. And, it's going to get into that. You get enough people doing this, the 900-pound gorilla, where are you going to tell them? And on that note, I hate to say it, I've got to bail because it's 7:00 and the wife's giving me the evil eye.
Yeah, I knew it was coming, but appreciate your time, Jeff. Thank you.
Right, guys, have a good night.
You too. So I'm going to take us over to the other stage, Randy, so we don't have to flip back and forth. So the next question I was going to ask Jeff actually works just as well for you, Randy. In your opinion, how do emergency powers become permanent, and what guardrails should citizens demand? And that's making the assumption that they will demand anything. I think a lot of people don't care, right? They care, but they won't stand up for themselves.
No, I think at this point in time, unfortunately, Americans aren't the same real Americans that we've always been, certainly the ones we grew up with. And you think about what they've done to the youth over the last 10 or 15 years. So imagine 20 years later, even if nothing happened, these kids that grew up now hating America, don't think America's any good, and we're all racist. And imagine the stuff they're going to vote in. And so, I'm sorry, what was the question again?
No, I was like or temporary emergency powers.
Yeah. So, well, we saw that in 2020, right? What Americans have to realize, again, whether they change the terminology and deem a state or a organization a terrorist organization, or like these emergency powers that are for emergencies, like when it's the same reason that we've heard on the news many times. Well, they're declaring a state of emergency here for this reason. What that does, that opens up more federal money, right? And more rules and applications. Just like in 2020, we saw they were able to tell us, now we're going to lock you down. You can't go anywhere. You don't need to go to work. You don't need to go to school. And those were some of those emergency powers that they're granted once it's deemed an emergency, or the same thing with the terrorist organizations. Then they can use different tools and mechanisms and money to combat that. Well, it's going to be the same thing. Right? They will grant these powers under emergency situations, but really they're wanting to do it anyway. So once they flip that switch, just like we saw, I don't remember, it wasn't Minnesota, Michigan, right? It had the female governor, right? Once they turned on those powers, do you see how long she drug that out? Same thing in Maine,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
They drug it out as long as they could because it gave them all these additional powers. And as it turns out, people in positions of power love more power. To them, that's like music to their ears. To us, It's about more control. So the problem is they will implement some of these that they're not granted now under normal situations. They're granted more power under these emergency rules, but then they will just adopt them and keep them plugged in, as we saw in 2020. Certainly in those blue states, they didn't want to give up that power. And it's very rare that we ever see government seize power that they will ever give it back up.
100%. So I just wrote down my answer to this question, and I've got it, on my pad here, and I'll show it after you answer the question. What's the top indicator that a state is entering managed decline?
Well, let's just take the state of New York, right? Or heck, we could just say New York City. We're about to watch that in real time, because we all know since 2020, there's been a mass exodus out of New York City, same as California, right? And they're just getting started, I do believe, because now that Ma'am Danny's going to be in charge, the stuff that's about to come down the pike. Well, let's take Knucklehead. What's his name? Used to like this guy. He's the famous actor, older guy. He's older than us, have been in a bunch of tough movies. But now Robert De Niro. There we go. Let's take him.
Asshole.
Let's take him, for example, right? He was one of the biggest voices for Ma'am Danny, right? And now he's saying he has to move out of New York City because Ma'am Danny and the system are going to want to take half his savings because he's considered a wealthy person. And that's right. Oh, they're definitely going to raise taxes, and it's going to be targeted. No. You got to targeted tax raises. Because just like this, he's going to target the wealthy. He's going to target wealthy and white neighborhoods. They're going to get to pay more than their proportional share. And so now he's leaving New York City because they're going to take half of his savings. And what did he say? I haven't worked in a long time. My savings is all I have left. Well, what's the matter? You wanted to get him elected, but you don't want to give him half your savings to do it? What's up with that, buddy?
Yeah. Well, think of in terms of the context of the question, the biggest indicator that a state is being managed into decline, in other words, they think that they can cut their way to prosperity, is by raising taxes. And I would say at the same time, raising taxes and reducing services, giving you less bang for the buck. That's a sure.
Yeah. And the same thing, this one person take property, they'll start taking more and more property from people.
I mean, they're already starting that, right?
Oh, yeah. More and more, though. More and more. It's a slippery slope. Once that starts.
Yep. Is it ever? I mean, we could do a whole series of episodes on that one topic. So let's jump into segment number 5, Randy, and it's titled The Household Plan, Win Where You Stand. So the best time to prepare for diverging systems is before the next headline, obviously, before the thing happens, right?
That would be optimum.
Exactly. And all of us, all of our households, we should be building redundancy. Things like cash, coins, silver, gold coins, communication backup options, at least 20 or 30 of them. 20 is 19, 19 is 18. Just joking. That's for you, JP. Food, all of those things are what people should be stocking up on right now. And here's the thing, is that we are a survival prepping company. We have never claimed to be intelligence experts, which is why I brought Khalid into the fold. And for those of you who want to know where Khalid is, he's working very hard right now, but he's highly accessible in our Guardians chat, which is the 6 signal channels that are turned into 10 channels on Element. He's very active with the Guardians, so he's still around. But my point is this, is I have told our audience for many, many years since I acquired this company, and Randy, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but I don't care what you're preparing for. You could be preparing for a hurricane. You could be preparing for a terrorist attack. You could be preparing for, the blizzard of the century, whatever. Virtually everything that we coach people on is applicable to all of the above. Food on the shelf, water, ways to filter water, making sure you have a shelter, making sure you have ways to defend yourself, making sure you have communications options. It's not a big secret, but there's not a lot of diversity in prepping, right, Randy?
No, No, it's pretty straightforward. You know what I mean? You either prepare with the things that you know need to prepare with, or you don't. It's just that simple.
It's not complex. And John Curry, again, one of our guardians, says Chris's magazines have 31 rounds because 31 is 30. You're actually really close. All of my guns are loaded at all times. And so if it's a 30 round mag, it's 30 plus one. If it's a staccato, like 2011, it's a 20 round mag with one in the chamber. There's always one more. So that's funny.
Well, you do have to load one in the chamber to get 31 in there, because I tried. You can't get 31 in otherwise.
No. But I'm just saying, I have 30.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The first trigger squeeze, I got 31 in an AR that's if I'm not running a drum or, something like that. But anyway, I digress a little bit there. So also, as far as prepping for SHTF, families should prioritize mobility. They should have options open to them. Reliable vehicle plan, relocation plan, some sort of skills that are portable, that if we end up into, some sort of post-apocalyptic scenario, that you actually bring something to the table as far as, say, a bartering economy or even just a mutual assistance group is concerned. At the end of the day, the people who have all of these things are the ones who are going to do the best and win. The people that we've coached to do all of these things. And let me throw something out there, Randy. I want to hear what your thought is too. I always have a concern for the people that are living paycheck to paycheck. And one of the things I threw out a couple years ago when you were on the podcast, I believe, Randy, is that, look, if you have a storage unit, here's the thing, that I did some work for some clients in that industry. Once somebody passes 90 days of having a storage, whatever, locker, garage, they typically are lifers. They're there for good. Okay. So if you're, things are tight, or even if you're not super tight, but you're just a step above that, one of the best things that you can do to be able to pivot in SHTF is go rent a storage unit somewhere that's a minimum of 1.5 gas tanks from wherever you are. And that means if the shit really hits the fan, somebody with one tank of gas can't get to where you're at. Move your stuff that's in storage close to this storage unit that's not close. Go to that small rural town, get to know some of the business owners, like in restaurants, stuff like that. And the stuff that you move from your storage unit here to there, make sure you add to that your preps. So you've got long shelf life food, doesn't require refrigeration. You got water, you got ammo, you got backups for your comms. You've got first aid kits. You've got, antibiotic and medicinal backup kits, all that sort of stuff. If you're already spending the money on a storage unit, this is the best, quickest way that you can have a destination. 83% of Americans live in cities, the vast majority of whom have nowhere to bug out to if things get really bad. Randy, I want to hear what your thoughts are on options, but I'm going to add an extra piece to it. What does the prospect of being in a FEMA emergency camp, how does that sit with you?
Well, I think I'm like most people today, right? That's probably not a good thing. To me, that sounds more like detention center, right? That's probably what that really is.
Good choice of words.
You would never see me volunteering to go into a FEMA camp. Reality says, it's going to be a real shit show if it comes down to that. That's a fact. So what people can do, honestly, your guess is going to be as good as mine in that moment, because we as Americans can't even fathom really what that looks like, because we've been so far removed from it. I only have a small inkling of understanding because I've been to Iraq and Afghanistan and some other third world countries during, some significant time periods, not just a normal average day. And human nature takes over. And that's not always a good thing, So if you were an average family, really, I think what you had was a good advice for people that can do that. That would be great advice. Or if you have I saw earlier in the chat somewhere back, people were talking about like the container homes, right? Or if you could have one buried out on a piece of property in the middle of nowhere that would be optimum. You know, it doesn't sound optimum today, right? Sounds like suffering and a lot of suck to me. But if really things really went terrible in a bad way and things were changed forever, that would look like a little piece of heaven at that time. I think what you said would be exactly right. If you're stuck in a city, good luck. That's all I can tell you. Because if you don't get out of there, there ain't no getting out. But if you can, and again, in those first few hours, you got to get the hell out of there. And if you have the ability and you haven't already done it, you should get on it right now. I wish I could. Believe me, if I could put a container house even in the middle of 40 acres out in the middle of nowhere where there's nothing, that's exactly what I would do. You know, you're not going to have electricity and all that kind of stuff, but trust me, we haven't always, and we still survive, people.
So I wrote a document for a company, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago, Randy, and it was on having some sort of place for you to bug out to, right? Yeah. We went through all the options from a storage unit to buying a home and everything in between. And one of the options that we put down is you can go to certain companies online. We've worked with a couple of them, so I'm not going to mention them because I don't want them to be competing against each other. But you can buy small parcels of land for under $1,000 online that are in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. And you know, it's a same day transfer of title, all that kind of stuff. And I'm not joking. Sometimes, though, by the way, like you could get a half an acre, 3/4 of an acre for as little as $800 in some places. I know one company has a bunch in Northeast Arkansas, Randy, which, as you know, is when it comes to hunting and fishing, what a great part of the country that is to be in. But here's my point. So you could buy a piece of land, may not be exactly what you want, but you could throw it on a credit card, buy it very, very quickly, and then go start getting things set up. And what I mean by that is maybe you level one spot of it so you could put a tent down. Maybe you do things like you put pavers down to put your vehicle and car on top of that. But then the next thing you do is you buy a drive under and you put the drive under over that spot. Well, now you have an extra layer of protection, right? And then maybe you have a little bit more money and you buy a small camper. Doesn't even have to be a full-blown RV, and you park it under the drive under, which protects it significantly from the sun and the elements. And then when you save up a little bit more money, maybe you build a barn dominium, you buy one of the small homes, or like Randy said, a container home, or maybe you build, a full load home. But you can do this stuff in stages if you truly want somewhere to remote to go to. But the fact of the matter is most people have nowhere to go. Randy, what happened in 1929 when the whole economy crashed as far as wildlife, especially deer, was concerned?
Well, they disappeared. Everybody thinks that's going to be, and it will be for a short period of time. But believe me, everybody else is going to be thinking the same thing, because that's what hunger does. And then everybody's going to go out and kill off the local wildlife. And I think back then, and there's been a couple of others we mentioned once before, right? There's actually been a place that happened. And after that passed, for a period of time, for the next few years, it made the news if there was any wildlife that showed up, because they ate them all.
That's actually no exaggeration on Randy's part. You're welcome to go look this up. Depending on what part of the country, it was something like 60 to 90 days after the stock market crash that it became front page news in some parts of the country if somebody even spotted a deer. It was the land was stripped. I think, Randy, what are your thoughts on living somewhere coastal where you have access to fish? I think that's probably about as good as it gets if you're looking for long-term protein sources that you haven't stacked up through Carnival and whatnot.
Well, here's what I would recommend. If any of y'all haven't watched all the Alone series, there's only, 6, 7, 8 seasons now. You need to go watch that, because fishing is very important. And it doesn't matter if it's coastal or if you have a river, because obviously a lake, unless it's a huge lake, you will run out of fish sooner or later. But the reality is, even the deer, right? That is not enough to sustain you over months. If you watch this show, literally it's about 30 days where it really starts showing on people, right? Even the people that are able to procure some food, right? But by the time you hit 60 days, man, it is a grind, and people aren't able. Now they're literally having to figure out what they're going to do in a day's time that they have energy for. And
Yeah.
the people that have had the best success are the ones that are still able to catch fish. Because let me tell you why, folks. Even that deer, there was a guy that got a wildebeest on this show. That's the biggest animal that's been killed on this show by far. But this guy, it did not have enough fat on the animal. And so fish was one of those things. If you eat fish, the omega-3s that comes out of that, and certainly the fatties, is good for your brain. And that's what you really need to continue life. So fishing would be a very big, huge part of that. Because again, if you're just depending on wildlife and you don't have cows have plenty of fat. But the rest of those things, deer, elk, moose, you name it, any of those big animals, including bison, don't have enough fat on them, folks.
Very, very lean, right? And
yes,
I want to say during one of the famines in the UK, it might have been Ireland or something like that, where people were eating rabbit. They were trying to get sources of protein wherever they could. They ended up with rickets and all kinds of other things because of being
rabbits. You can really should only eat in the winter after the first hard freeze,
right?
Because they have worms in them. That's a fact. Rabbits do, and it's that first freeze that gets rid of those, and that's really when you should hunt and eat rabbit. But of course, in survival situations, you don't have a choice.
Yeah,
just make sure you deworm it
for sure. But they have no fat on them, and
they don't
eat good fat, right?
Yep. Yep.
And the brain is essentially, comprised of fat.
Now we see back in the day, they used every part of the animal.
Correct. Yeah,
exactly.
That's a great point, Randy, because if you look at Native Americans versus, Americans today, they ate everything on the animal, including every stitch of fat. Look at the Eskimos in particular, right?
Yep.
But they were super lean because there's a big difference between good fats and non-good fats, like trans fats, that sort of stuff. The other part to the equation, of course, is sugar, right? So we didn't start seeing fat Native Americans till we introduced alcohol and other things with sugar to them. Sugar, in simplistic terms, turns your body into a fat absorption machine, where normally if you're meeting your macros for fat and your body just gets rid of anything extra, sugar will cause it to store all that fat. And that's where obesity comes from, amongst other things. I don't know if you know this or not, Randy, but Survival Dispatch was founded December 2016. The founder owned it for the first half. I've owned it now for the second half. And the first half of the lifespan for Survival Dispatch was focused on primitive survival. And it was I don't know, call it like it was Tony's crown jewel or something like that. He had like 23 businesses, but he was losing $300,000-$400,000 a year on Survival Dispatch because he was bringing in some really astute people. So Alan Kay won Alone season 2, and he was one of the people that Tony brought in. What I discovered, though, I can't afford to lose $300,000-$400,000 a year. Is
come on.
83% of Americans live in cities, which is why I pivoted to urban survival.
Yeah. And
then also, as I told you in the spring, Randy, I took the list of all the videos. We had like 4,000 videos, and 42% of them were related to terrorism. And that's why I specifically reached out to Khalid and brought him into the fold. And while we may talk a lot about radical jihadi terrorism, at the end of the day, we don't present ourselves to be intel experts. We have guys on the team like Khalid, and there's people in the background that are intel experts. But guys like me, we're survival guys. We talk about things like food, water, shelter, comms, all that kind of stuff. So at the end of the day, I don't even remember how we got going down that. But Randy, were you with me last week when I mentioned the lady? We called her Janet Doe by chance?
Yes.
Okay. So a couple updates. Number one, a bunch of super nice people in the audience emailed support@survivaldispatch.com with ideas to help Janet Doe. There's a bunch I haven't responded to yet. I promise I will get to it, but 7 days a week, I have 300 to 500 legitimate emails, and I answer about 80% of them, but I will get to all the ones for Janet Doe, which, by the way, just so people can lock in on this, I do not check DMs on any platform, period. So if you send me a message on Substack, Patreon, whatever it is, the chances are very, very low that I will see it. It's not because I don't care. It's because of bandwidth. I don't have the bandwidth. I mean, yesterday was Sunday for everybody else, Randy. I started my morning by working on a special report on Maduro, and I ended my day by spending hours testing antennas with Dr. Mike. So there's no rest for the wicked, right? But
that's what they say.
The reason I brought this up is because for all y'all that are still with us here tonight, we have a follower who her daughters essentially excommunicated her because she wasn't pro Charlie 19 like her daughter is. So big split ideologically. The people who used to take her to church are no longer driving. She recently stopped driving of her own accord. She just didn't feel safe. And she's in her mid 70s. She's looking for advice and help on, who could she potentially team up with when 9/11 2.0 hits. Well, in advance of that. And you've got things like, okay, she doesn't drive. She rents a place, and she's written some about it on our Substack in the comment section. She's not in a position to get herself to and from church. Her church is 15 miles away. The other churches in the area just don't suit her taste. Any thoughts from our audience that y'all have to help this nice lady on how to approach this problem would be very much appreciated. I floated a few things by her, but this one's a tough nut to crack. I don't know if you've ruminated on it anymore, Randy. If you have anything you want to add, by all means do so, but support at survivaldispatch.com for anybody's good, great ideas. Go ahead, Randy.
Well, I think, man, it's pretty awesome that a bunch of the viewers have reached out to you to try to help out. I don't, as I said there, that's what that's my best advice was us to lean on our network that we have here to see if there's anybody. Now, I don't know where she is, you know what I mean, or what state, but we'll, that. So work all that out.
I'm not violating her privacy, just so you all know. She put this on our Substack in a comment section. She is in Northeast Ohio.
Northeast Ohio. Okay.
Yeah.
So we have to have, my point to that is I know that, we've got a pretty robust crowd. There's got to be some people around her that we could do. If she was in my neck of the woods in Texas, then I would be more than happy to take her in when that went down. But, so I guarantee there's other people that would do the same.
Randy, you will not be surprised by this at all, but I'm going to let you tell our audience about Father Duck, because what an incredible real American TM Randy Nancy is.
Yeah. So Father Duck has sent me a radio, that is a very nice radio. So that I have communications beyond the cell phone and the POC radios. This is a legitimate radio. He has sent me 3 packages now of stuff leading up to Christmas. This hat was one of them. This microphone, this gaming microphone, which is much better than
works good.
The one I had previously purchased. I've got, and I'm going to be using this thing very soon because about my neighbor, right?
Yeah.
He also sent me this tiny little drone that I can, fly around, and I'm going to, take some video of this guy's backyard. I know he's got something back there. I know he does.
Yeah.
And I was trying to think what else there. He gave me several items. Very nice.
Randy, the Green Beret now has his own ISR thanks to Father.
That's right. That's right, man. I've got the hookup, man. I'm coming for you, baby.
Well, I just got to say, Father Duck is a prime example of what it means when Randy says real American. That's Father Duck. He's such a generous man. And he's been very generous to us across the board at Survival Dispatch. I really appreciate him. I promise all y'all who wrote to me with regards to Janet Doe, I will respond to you. I flagged all of your messages. I'm not a word of a lie. There's about 1,500 unread messages just in my Survival Dispatch email right now, which is why I can only get to about 80% of the time. But anybody who also has ideas on how we can help Janet Doe I'd love to hear what you've got to say. And I know Randy's right. We've got an awesome audience, just a fantastic group of people. So with that being said, Randy, it's our favorite time of the night, as you know. In 3, 2, 1. It is time for the Carnivalt Hero of the Night. And this is just an awesome dude. So shout out to Nick Shirley's right-hand man, David, for bringing the receipts. This man is a hero. This man deserves a million thank yous. So when you see the camera with Nick Shirley, 23-year-old Nick Shirley, putting himself in harm's way, and now he has tons of death threats against him now, by the way, which we mentioned, previously. We were concerned that was going to happen. This is the gentleman who is with him and putting himself in harm's way as well. Randy, real American TM Randy Nance, this guy?
Oh yeah, definitely. Who else would do that?
What an awesome.
No one.
True story. Yeah, true story. It's not going to be the not real Americans, right?
That's right.
All right. So I found another conflicted question. I mean, this is part of the problem, Randy, of me working at a minimum of 15, 16 hours a day. I've had some days in the past month that have literally been 20 hours long because I'm on a mission to complete our mission, which is to dispatch information to our fellow Americans and friends of Americans, so all y'all survive in these very dangerous times. But I make mistakes like the conflicted card. I'm only human, right? So I found another one. And this is an interesting one. And I wish Khalid was with us tonight for this one. You are face to
I can already tell just from the first sentence.
So you are face to face with the murderer of your family. The assassin is bound at your feet. There is no government or anyone around to stop you from doing whatever you want with the person who killed your loved ones. You both are inside a barn. You have a few tools at your disposal, such as a knife, hay forks, pigs, horses, and ropes. What would you do to the person who murdered your family if you were in this situation? And would you show mercy? So since it's just the two of us, Randy, you get to go first.
Well, of course, as these always go, there's not a whole lot of context either. We don't know, did he hunt them down? How did this go down? How did he kill them? That all plays into it for me. I mean, first of all, the most mercy I'm going to show this guy is a very clean, very quick death. He's not leaving. He killed my whole family. I don't give a shit. He's not leaving breathing. But whether I drag it out or not would depend on what his actions were. What did he do? What exactly did he do to my family? You know what I mean? And how? That would matter to me because I'm one of those. I mean, I can't help it. I'm a normal person. I'm a regular average man that's led an extraordinary life. But the reality is, I don't take shit from nobody. And if someone killed my family, you're going to die one way or the other. It's just a question of how bad is it going to be for you?
Yeah, I would revert, Randy, to my position on murder in general. I think that murderers, that we have no ifs, ands, or buts, we know it's a murderer, there's no doubt whatsoever, should be disposed of in the same manner that they killed their victims in. So if they tortured somebody, then that's what they get in return. So zero mercy, put it that way. The question specifically asked about mercy, no mercy at all.
Well, there are times to extend mercy. This wouldn't be one of them. This is when
100%.
this is the time when God's going to spread mercy, buddy. Maybe he'll give you mercy, but that remains to be seen. I'm going to send you to the meeting though. You're going to get to find out right now.
That's a great way of putting it. So last reminder, by the way, I put a bunch of links out there. So download the LDS Prepper Manual PDF, the link for Wasatch Wagyu and the discount code, the link for Carnivalt, the discount code. As you can see down here, if you have ideas to help Janet Doe, email support@survivaldispatch.com, your ideas to help her. Appreciate all y'all on that one for sure. Quick reminder, so our Element server, which is built on the same code base as Signal, but it's built my way. This thing is locked down hard. It's locked down so hard, Randy, that there's some people who've been onboarded and they went to change their picture or their name like 3 times in a row really fast. And we have a back-end security piece that says, if you keep changing your settings like that, you're going to end up in getting a suspension. And I've locked this thing down pretty hard. You got to have a balance, but it's in the right spot. Trust me, it's nothing that's over the top, but it's an ultra secure private area. And you can go to survivaldispatch.news, sign up as a Guardian, $7.99 a month or $79.99 a year. You get 2 months for free, but you get access to our complete community. We have thousands of Guardians around the country reporting in on what's actually happening in various jurisdictions when the legacy media and maybe some crazy people on X are telling you otherwise. The sharing of information, phenomenal. Everything from homesteading to growing fruits and vegetables, to tending to chickens, to guns, ammo, tactical training. Sarah, have you seen the videos from Sarah, Randy, here in Central Florida?
I don't know.
You would know if you'd seen them. This lady, really bad pun here, by the way. This lady is a pistol. She is a marksman, unlike few I've ever seen in my life. So get this into you. She takes a target, Randy, and she duct tapes the little tray that your ammo comes in, the box of ammo. And then she cuts one of the little squares in front of the target, and she takes a shot from 20 feet away, and she puts the bullet back in the box that it came out of without hitting any of the paper around it. It's just that tiny little square.
That is a really cool trick.
Oh, well, she's 100% real American, TM Randy Nance. She shows all kinds of really cool drills that she's doing and stuff. She posted one the other day ago, and I want to say she was at 20 yards this time, and there was a 10-inch gong, and the timer goes up, beep, like that, and she draws and shoots it. It was like, 0.8 of a second to do that and hit the target. She's an absolute marksman. It's crazy, Randy. She is fixing to have her own channel on our Element server that is specifically for firearms training drills. You couldn't ask for somebody better. And we're adding a channel for Khalid to do tactical training, and Element allows us to do webinars. So it'll probably take a couple months, but we'll be doing video webinars with Guardians in our private community, which cannot be deplatformed by Big Brother Big Tech. Again, it's a passion of mine. I'm sick and tired of being deplatformed in strikes, bullshit strikes. So I had to do something about it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's you said that, and it reminded me. My dad grew up with a guy. His name was Mike Brown. I'm assuming he's still alive. I don't know. We haven't seen him in years. Our families grew up together, right? And Mike, my dad said, was in the top 5 in quick draw, right? But the thing special about Mike, he could do it with either hand. My dad said in a split second, he could draw and in a split second fire both of them through the hole of a door eyepiece, both bullets in a split second like that.
Wow. That's impressive. That's like our friend Sarah. She's absolutely amazing.
That's called gifted. You were born to it, folks. Not everybody can do that.
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, you work with what God gave you, right?
That's exactly right.
Some people are predisposed to one thing, and some people are predisposed to something completely different. But we'll be back tomorrow evening at the usual time, 7 p.m. Eastern, with the next episode in our Long War series, and it's called Secession 2.0 Movements. The theme is breaking away. Essentially, renewed pushes for independence and state sovereignty fracture the nation. And we've been talking about this for quite some time now, as far as the balkanization of the United States. And I've been saying for probably 5 years now that we will balkanize, and then that sets up battle lines for Civil War 2.0, something none of us ever want to see happen. But if we don't fix some pretty big problems in our country, I don't see how it can be avoided. The funny thing is, Randy, the left always wants to preach diversity, right? It's so important. We need to have these diverse cultures and diversity this and diversity and that. Okay, so how come when you look at the map of America now, you've got all the SSRI junkies in blue states that want, communism essentially, and you got real Americans in all of the red states. Doesn't that tell you that it's basic human nature that I want to be with my people? I mean,
yeah, well, as you well know, really, that is not diversity. What they're really doing is watering down the vote because no one wants to vote in their kind of policies and shit. That's really what this is about.
yeah, but again, it's birds.
Well, birds of a feather flock together. And of course, why would you come to a state that's going to arrest you and put you into prison when you can go into a state that's going to let you break the law whenever you want? That's an easy pick for those criminals. And of course, it's going to draw them there. It always does. That's what the big cities do.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, that's it. We'll be back at the usual time, 7 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow night. Between now and then, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. God bless America.
God bless America.
God bless our law enforcement. God bless our troops. And enjoy the closing video, y'all. Thank you.